Chapter 273. Don't! Han Yunxi screamed and snatched the porcelain bottle from the little squirrel's hands at lightning speed. She used so much force that the little squirrel fell backwards. Han Yunxi was so scared that her heart almost jumped out of her chest. She had argued so fiercely with Long Fei Yi that she had forgotten to return this thing. No matter where this thing came from, it was very important. If it was eaten by the little squirrel, she thought that she probably wouldn't be able to see Long Fei Yi again in this lifetime. The little squirrel was scared silly by Han Yunxi's aggressive attitude. It curled up its little body, but unfortunately, it was full, and its round belly couldn't shrink back no matter how hard it tried. Thus, it stuck out its big belly and curled up its limbs and head, looking pitifully at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi checked that the perplexing butterfly illusion in the porcelain bottle hadn't been lost or contaminated. Only then did she let out a big breath. She had been scared to death. She didn't even know what this thing was. If it was gone, where would she go to find another bottle to return to Long Fei Yi? After calming herself down and covering the rosemary, Han Yunxi glared angrily at the little squirrel. Master is so fierce. The little squirrel shrank its head even further. Its black eyes blinked innocently as it obediently waited for Han Yunxi to deal with it. Han Yunxi was still panicking, but when she saw the little squirrel's cute appearance, she was both angry and amused. She didn't know what to do with it. How was this a foodie she had picked up? This was simply a money-losing good. It had eaten 2 big bags of her poison, and a lot of it had been concocted using the medicinal ingredients she had spent a lot of money to buy from Medicine City's medicinal market. If it continued to eat like this, the stock in her detoxification system would be in imminent danger. Han Yunxi checked the medical pouch again and found that the poison inside was all gone. The poison needles, however, were neat and untouched. Hee, at least this little thing was tactful. Otherwise, she really would have found a bag and tied it up. Han Yunxi looked at the little squirrel and suddenly realized a problem. She exclaimed, "You recognize this poison?" If Long Fei hadn't tested it for her, she wouldn't have been able to tell that it was highly toxic. The little squirrel must have known, which was why it ate it. The little squirrel, guilty of its mistake, was scared again. It continued to hide behind Han Yunxi. It didn't seem to understand what Han Yunxi meant. Han Yunxi didn't know how to communicate with this little thing. She brought the perplexing butterfly illusion in front of it and waved her hand. Remember, no matter how hungry you are, you can't eat this thing. Do you understand? Unexpectedly, the little squirrel understood and immediately stood up, allowing its round belly to hang on the ground. It nodded its head vigorously, afraid that Han Yunxi wouldn't understand. Seeing Han Yunxi laugh, the little squirrel slowly relaxed. Not long after, it climbed onto Han Yunxi's arm and grinned at her. Han Yunxi used 2 fingers to pinch the little squirrel's neck and held it in her hand. She lay on a rocking chair at the side and brought the little squirrel in front of her. No one spoke when she was bored, so it was nice to have a squirrel to keep her company. There are so many people. Why are you looking for me? How many meals do you eat in a day? How old are you this year? Do you have a name? Han Yunxi was actually talking to herself. How could she expect the little squirrel to answer? The little squirrel pricked up its ears and listened attentively. The more it listened, the more confused it became. It could judge the meaning of a human's body language, expression, and tone, but it couldn't understand such a long list of words at all. Han Yunxi looked left and right, then suddenly laughed. "I'll just call you little thing, okay?" It had a domineering name, Poisonous Beast Gushu. What little thing? The little squirrel didn't understand, but seeing Han Yunxi laugh, it also laughed happily. Thus, the nickname of Poisonous Beast Gushu was happily decided just like that. Little thing. Even if she wasn't happy, smiling more would cheer her up. Little thing, let's go find third elder. Han Yunxi hid her disappointment. She was still the magnanimous, unrestrained, strong, and stubborn Han Yunxi. She still had many things to do. Although she was forced to come to Medical City, she also wanted to investigate Madame Tianqin. How exactly did Madame Tianxin get a director position for Han Kongan back then? Han Yunxi had asked Luo Zuishan before, but Luo Zuishan had never paid attention to a doctor of Han Kongan's level. Instead, he had heard of Madame Tianxin's name, but he didn't know her. The director position had always been conferred by the Elders Guild, so it was best to ask Third Elder about this matter. Han Yunxi was about to leave when she remembered something. She sat back down and took Little Thing out of the medical pouch. She closed her eyes and concentrated for a while before putting Little Thing back. What was she doing? Of course, she was refilling the medical pouch with some necessary herbs, some defensive poisons, and some antidotes. In the medical school, there were many eyes staring at her. It was better to be cautious, lest the detoxification system reveal any flaws and attract unnecessary trouble. Little Thing saw the pouch full of poisons and was very confused. How did these things appear? Could it be that its new master was someone who could conjure poisons out of thin air? It seemed like it had followed the right person. Little Thing was very happy. It threw its master's fierce look to the back of its mind and actually started to eat the poisons in big mouthfuls right in front of her. Although it was eating in big mouthfuls, this Little Thing ate silently. Moreover, it closed its eyes and looked like it was enjoying it. Fortunately, Han Yunxi took a second look. Otherwise, when she urgently needed the medical pouch, this Little Thing would really spoil it. In just a short while, Little Thing had already swept through half a pouch of poisons. Han Yunxi's eyes twitched as she watched. From last night until now, it had only been a day and a night, and it still continued to eat after eating 2 big pouches. How big was its appetite? It wouldn't eat too much, right? Han Yunxi suddenly picked up Little Thing. Little Thing immediately opened its eyes. At first, it was confused, then it was frightened and shrank into a white fur ball. Its master seemed to be angry again, but he didn't do it on purpose. It had just woken up after sleeping for 5 years, and its stomach was rumbling with hunger. In addition, it had been drained of a porcelain bottle of blood, so it was really, really hungry. "Are you still hungry?" Han Yunxi asked. Little Thing squeaked a few times, but didn't dare to shout. Han Yunxi didn't understand. She took out some poison and fed it to Little Thing. Little Thing actually didn't dare to eat it, but it really couldn't resist the temptation and took a big bite. As it ate, it also squeaked in grievance. It really didn't do it on purpose. She lost to it. Han Yunxi simply sat down and put Little Thing back into the medical pouch to let it eat. As soon as the poison was reduced, she took it out from the detoxification system and added it. She wanted to see how much poison Little Thing's stomach could hold. However, reality soon told Han Yunxi how stupid she was. In less than an hour, half of the stock in her detoxification system was used as a sacrifice to Little Thing's stomach. But even so, Little Thing still didn't seem to be full. As long as it was given, it would eat. In the end, Han Yunxi didn't dare to take out the medicinal herbs. Her heart ached. Those finished poisons and the medicinal herbs used to make them were all painstakingly added to the detoxification system. What kind of sin did she commit to take in such a wastrel? Just as she didn't know what to do with Little Thing, there was a sudden knock on the door. Who was it? This was the guest room for Gu Beiwe. There was still no news from him, so who would be knocking on the door? Han Yunxi quickly hid Little Thing away and went to open the door. Unexpectedly, she saw a man dressed in white as soon as she opened the door. His robes were whiter than snow, and his eyes were clear and warm. It reminded her of a line from a poem. "A young man on a stranger's side is like jade, whose family's young master is unparalleled in this world. He's back, Gu Beiwe." However, Gu Beiwe's face was currently as white as a sheet of paper. His entire person seemed to be suffering from a serious illness and was extremely weak. "What's wrong? Where did you go?" Han Yunxi was alarmed. The last time she saw Gu Beiwe like this was a few months ago. Gu Beiwe didn't answer, but asked, "Esteemed Wang Fei, how is the crown prince's illness?" "Don't worry about that for now. Just what's wrong with you?" Han Yunxi was anxious. No matter what, Gu Beiwe had been implicated because of her. Moreover, he was her only friend in Tianing Palace. She didn't want anything to happen to him. I was sick and couldn't come back. I've made esteemed Wang Fei worry. Even though he was ill, his cultivation was still good. Han Yunxi quickly helped him inside and personally poured some hot water. I went out to visit an old friend, but who knew that I'd catch a cold from the night wind? I was bedridden for several days and forgot to send someone to report. Please forgive me, esteemed Wang Fei, Gu Beiwei explained. Let me take a look. Han Yunxi pulled his hand over to take his pulse. This fellow was the same as last time. He'd caught a cold, and his entire body was in a bad state. This had to do with his weak constitution because he'd been taking medicine since he was a child. Needless to say, Han Yunxi felt his pulse again. It really was the same as last time. Han Yunxi didn't have any suspicions about Gu Beiwei to begin with. Now that she saw his pulse, she didn't think much of it. This fellow was sick at a friend's house. No wonder she couldn't find him anywhere in Medical City. It's good that you're back. I was just worried that something would happen to you. Han Yunxi exhaled in relief, then told Gu Beiwei how she defeated Third Elder. Esteemed Wang Fei, didn't you say you didn't have an antidote? Gu Beiwei asked seriously. I got one later on. Han Yunxi smiled, hesitating over whether or not to tell Gu Beiwei about the poison beast. She always trusted him more than usual. She couldn't explain it either. Just like how she was used to having him help her when she used needles to detoxify poisons. But at this moment, the little squirrel hiding in the medical pouch suddenly scurried out and landed on Gu Beiwei's shoulder. It wasn't afraid of strangers at all, and even happily hopped around his shoulders. Gu Beiwei was astonished. Esteemed Wang Fei, you raised this? Han Yunxi was stunned. She only wanted to say that she was truly defeated. But it was strange. Ever since she came back, the little squirrel had been hiding and didn't come out. It was completely unguarded against Gu Beiwei. Han Yunxi couldn't explain it. Seeing the little squirrel's happy appearance, she thought that this was fate. I didn't raise it, I picked it up. Long Tianma's poison was cured by it. Han Yunxi joked. Poison beast. Gu Beiwei was shocked. Han Yunxi was also shocked. You also know about the poison beast? Gu Beiwei seriously nodded. Esteemed Wang Fei, forgive this subordinate for speaking bluntly, but this thing isn't something you can raise. Chapter 274. Gu Beiwei seemed to understand the little thing quite well. He had a director grandfather, so it wasn't strange for him to understand the little thing. What do you mean? Han Yunxi asked with interest. Gu Beiwei smiled helplessly. It eats a lot. The princess consort will be eaten until she collapses. Han Yunxi was happy as she opened the medical kit for Gu Beiwei to see. There was no need to say anything as the two of them smiled at each other. For a moment, all their worries, whether it was hers or his, could be temporarily thrown away. Gu Beiwei was like the sun in the winter, not hot, but warm. He could always drive away the haze in Han Yunxi's heart. Laughing was laughing, but Gu Beiwei still explained seriously. Princess Consort, the poisonous beast's fangs are poisonous, and its blood can cure hundreds of poisons. This is all because it eats hundreds of poisons, so once the poisonous beast bites someone or uses its blood to save someone, it must keep eating, otherwise its life will be in danger. Many people were fighting over the Gu Shu, but there weren't many people who knew this secret. Han Yunxi was very surprised. She turned around to look at the little thing, and saw the little thing nestled on Gu Beiwei's shoulder, blinking its eyes as it looked at her. Its little mouth kept moving, as if it was hungry. So it was like this. No wonder it couldn't help secretly eating when she was so fierce. Then how much does it need to eat before it's full? Han Yunxi anxiously asked. Not to mention how useful the little thing was with how cute it was, she couldn't bear for it to be hungry. Gu Beiwei turned his head to look at the little thing. That gentle gaze filled with pity almost made the little thing drown in it. The little thing didn't know who he was or what his relationship with its master was, but it liked the clean aura coming from his body.
We can only ask it about this.
However, even if it's full, its blood doesn't have any medicinal properties. Every time it bleeds to save someone, it needs a certain amount of time to accumulate. Only then can its blood cure hundreds of poisons. If it bleeds too much, it won't live long. Han Yunshi chuckled at Gu Beiyue's words. In the past, this little beast even wanted to exchange more of its blood for a bit of poison. Does it know how dangerous it'll be if it bleeds too much? Who was the one who spread the rumor that the poisonous rats were immortal? How much does it need to eat to recover? Han Yunshi asked seriously. Gu Beiyue shook his head helplessly. He had to ask the little thing about this, as he wasn't sure either. Esteemed Wang Fei, the most important thing right now is to quickly feed it. I'm afraid it's starving. Gu Beiyue's hands were very large, enough to hold the little thing in his palm. He lightly scratched its ears, making the little squirrel feel extremely comfortable. It wanted nothing more than to lie in this man's palm for the rest of its life, and never get up. But Han Yunshi quickly pulled it out of its soft nest. Come on, let's go find something to eat. With Gu Beiyue present, Han Yunshi couldn't get poisons from her detox system, so she might as well go out and buy them. In any case, she needed to replenish her detox system with medicinal ingredients. This one will go with esteemed Wang Fei. Gu Beiyue immediately rose to his feet. You've just recovered from a serious illness, so you should rest. I'll be back soon. Judging from Gu Beiyue's frail state, Han Yunshi was worried that he'd be blown away by the wind. But Gu Beiyue persisted. Esteemed Wang Fei, this one knows quite a few medicine merchants in Medical City. I can introduce you to them. The most important link between Medicine City and Medical City was the medicine merchants. They controlled all of Cloud Realm Continent's medicine market. All right, although Han Yunshi wasn't going to be a wholesaler, she still needed plenty of ingredients. It'd be much cheaper if she found a medicine merchant. Thinking up to here, Han Yunshi felt for the limitless gold card in her sleeve. She'd gotten it from Long Fei Yi in Medicine City. It was the equivalent of a modern-day credit card that could be used throughout Cloud Realm Continent. She kept a record of her purchases, and Long Fei Yi would pay her back. Much of the detox system stock had come from this card. Han Yunshi hesitated before silently placing the card on the table. She didn't want it anymore. But as soon as she and Gu Beiyue stepped out of the door, Lil Thing slipped out of the medical pouch and rushed back at lightning speed. It picked up the gold card with its mouth and bit it to make sure it was the real deal before slipping back into the pouch. It had a little secret. It wasn't just greedy for food, but money as well. Han Yunshi and Gu Beiyue had just left the room when they ran into Gu. Gu couldn't find Mu Ling in all of Medical City, so he'd just returned. He was pleasantly surprised to see Han Yunshi. Poison lass, you didn't leave? Han Yunshi grew angry. Where's Mu Ling? She almost forgot about Mu Ling before she saw him. That girl wouldn't be forgiven so easily for pushing her. That wasn't just repaying kindness with enmity, it was murder. I'm looking for her too. When you find her, you can kill her with a knife, Gu said seriously. Kill her? Han Yunshi could tell that Gu and Mu Ling had a close relationship. This fellow had a mysterious background, so how could she kill someone so close to him just like that? She liked you so much for nothing, Han Yunshi probed. Unexpectedly, Gu sighed. AI, it's a pity that the one I like is you. On one side, Gu Beiyue creased his brows at the words, but Han Yunshi had long gotten used to Gu Qishao's frivolity. She simply rolled her eyes and ignored him. Gu caught up. Was it that fellow from the Shadow Clan who saved you? Bring Mu Ling here, and I'll tell you, Han Yunshi said seriously. By the way, tell me who taught you your poison skills? Gu quickly added, not minding that Gu Beiyue was overhearing. This fellow was pestering her and treating her well because he wanted to know where her poison skills came from. What did he want to know? What did he suspect? Every time she asked, he wouldn't tell her. Han Yunshi couldn't be bothered with him. There were many things she didn't know about herself, such as the secret of her birth, Lady Tianxin's death, the poison sex little squirrel's affection for her, and how the young master from the Shadow Clan had saved her. Han Yunshi gave Gu Qishao a fake smile before walking away with large strides. Gu Qishao immediately chased after her. Where are you going? You didn't go with Long Fei Yi?
Han Yunshi didn't speak.
Gu Beiyue walked on her other side and glanced at Gu. A faint smile flashed in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared. Poison lass, you didn't go with Long Fei Yi. Why don't you come with this young master? We'll be a celestial couple and eat well together.
Gu teased.
Celestial couple? Eat well together? Han Yunxi couldn't help but laugh at how this guy could use those two words together. But she ignored him and walked faster and faster. But soon enough, she stopped and whipped her head towards Gu Qixiao. Caught off guard, Gu Qixiao backed up a step. What do you want to do? Han Yunxi looked at him and fell silent for a long time. Then she suddenly smiled. Take me somewhere. Gu thought she was going to do something, but his lips curled up at her words. He said openly, Where are we going? Just tell me. Han Yunxi didn't stand on ceremony either and said, The Poison Grass Warehouse. The Poison Grass Warehouse was the equivalent of the Poison Sex Storehouse. It was located on the main peak of Lotus Peak and was a natural forest of poisonous plants. All kinds of poisonous plants grew from the middle of the mountain all the way to the peak. It was planted by the poison sect at first, but due to their tenacious vitality, the poisonous plants continued to grow wildly even after the poison sect was destroyed and no one took care of them. The medical academy had once set fire to it, but the wildfire couldn't extinguish it. The spring breeze came and the new poisonous plants grew even thicker. After that, the medical academy never touched it again and instead guarded the entire mountain. If she hadn't seen Gu, Han Yunxi wouldn't have thought that she could take Lil Thing to this place. She and Gu Beiwei couldn't enter the poison sect's forbidden grounds on their own, but things were different with Gu's help. What are you going to do there? Gu grew suspicious. He didn't expect the poison lass to know about the poison grass warehouse. To broaden my horizons. Han Yunxi spoke very modestly. Even if she moved the entire warehouse into her detox system, no one would know.
Deal.
Gu agreed decisively, then added, Tell me why that Shadow Clan fellow saved you. Do you know each other from before? Han Yunxi's face darkened. Can't we just be friends? Can I have a friend who treats me honestly and doesn't have any ulterior motives? How annoying! A complicated look flitted through Gu's eyes, but he quickly recovered his flirtatious smile. I'll take you there right away. Let's go. So speaking, he grabbed Han Yunxi's hand and prepared to leave, but Han Yunxi shook him off. Imperial Physician Gu is going too. Gu immediately stopped and avoided Han Yunxi to look straight at Gu Beiwei. What are you going to do? Gu Beiwei didn't expect Han Yunxi to bring him along. He was about to reply when Han Yunxi beat him to it. To broaden my horizons?
Gu didn't hold back.
A burden?
Hey.
That's too much. Han Yunxi was angry. Although Gu Beiwei didn't know much about poisons, he still knew some of the ingredients needed to concoct them. The more people there were, the more power there would be. Besides, Gu Beiwei could really broaden his horizons if he went. Such a poisonous herb storehouse, whether it was an ordinary doctor or a poison doctor, they couldn't ask for anything more. Gu Beiwei wasn't angry. Of course, he also cleverly didn't express his opinion. Gu realized that while he was joking around, he didn't know when this girl had him completely under her control. He, who had always been undisciplined and reckless, actually didn't have the courage to reject her. Some people said that a wanton and unrestrained man would become henpecked after marriage. However, he only liked her, but he was actually afraid of her. Gu was seriously planning in his heart. He had to think of a way to make Long Fei divorce her so that he could directly marry her. He let go of Han Yunxi's hand and confidently turned around. Let's go together. Follow me and don't get lost. Han Yunxi was overjoyed. She squeezed her eyebrows at Gu Beiwei, indicating that he didn't have to worry. Gu Beiwei nodded. A trace of warmth flowed through his eyes. He whispered, The Shadow Clan saved you? And you know about the Shadow Clan? Facing Gu Beiwei, Han Yunxi was a lot more honest. In fact, if Gu didn't have any ulterior motives, there were some things that she was willing to tell him. I did. Gu Beiwei hesitated for a moment before saying, I heard that among the 7 noble families of the Great Qin Empire, the Shadow Clan was destroyed a long time ago. The 7 noble families still had descendants who hid their names in the world. However, the Shadow Clan must have followed the Western Qin imperial family. I also feel that it's strange. Why do you think this is? Han Yunxi was suspicious. Such a casual question actually caused a trace of sadness to appear in Gu Beiyue's eyes. It was faint, but it couldn't be erased no matter how hard he tried. After leaving the courtyard, Gu led them to a small path. 1 woman and 2 men.
Who would they meet?
Chapter 275. With Gu leading the way, in less than half a day's time, Han Yunxi and the rest were already standing halfway up the main peak of Lotus Flower Peak. The climate affected the distribution of vegetation. At higher latitudes, the distribution of vegetation would have an obvious difference, but this was the first time Han Yunxi had seen such a peculiar distribution of vegetation. Lotus Flower Peak's main peak didn't have any vegetation at all. It was a barren land which was about 3 steps wide and circled around the mountain. The vegetation below this barren land was normal and rather dense, but above it was a strange forest. The trees were all in the shape of umbrellas, like banyan trees with countless roots hanging down. The ground was filled with vines which grew wildly, covering most of the mountain in a layer of green carpet. There were even colorful flowers blooming on top. From the middle of the mountain to the peak, it looked like a mysterious forest. Han Yunxi was dumbstruck. Although she wasn't sure what the maximum capacity of the detoxification system was, but she was sure that the entire mountain was filled with poison. Even 10 detoxification systems wouldn't be enough. Similarly, she didn't know how big Little Thing's appetite was, but she was sure that this time, it would be enough for Little Thing to eat until it was full. Luckily, she had thought of this place. Otherwise, it would be a huge loss. Without her around, Long Fei Yi probably wouldn't come. After all, that fellow didn't know anything about poison, and the bodyguards had already left. Han Yunxi knocked on the medical pouch, wanting to call Little Thing out. Now that they were here, it could eat as much as it wanted. Unexpectedly, she felt a tickling sensation at her feet. She lowered her head and saw that Little Thing had unknowingly slipped to her feet and was excitedly greeting her. If it wasn't for Gu, Little Thing would probably cry out in excitement. It didn't expect its new master to be so smart and actually knew to bring it to this place. One must know that it had eaten here every day until it grew up. Han Yunxi secretly waved her hand, and Little Thing seemed to understand as it immediately walked past the barren land. But it didn't walk far, and not long after, it turned back to look at Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi was afraid that it didn't understand, so she continued to wave her hand to indicate that it could play as it pleased. However, the Little Thing kept looking back. Gu Beiyue saw this and whispered, "Is it saying goodbye to you? Will it come back for you after it leaves?" Han Yunxi had never thought about this. I think so. In fact, other than curing Long Tianma's poison, she didn't deliberately want to obtain the poisonous beast. She never thought of using poison to do anything outrageous. She didn't need such a powerful poisonous beast. The Little Thing liked her and stayed by her side. In her opinion, it was fate. If the Little Thing wanted to leave, then she would leave it to fate. After all, this poisonous herb storage was more suitable for it than her medical kit. Little Thing looked at its master and Gu Beiyue talking from afar. It was so anxious that it wanted to cry out, but it was afraid that Gu would hear it. It looked like it would take some time for it to get used to its new master before she understood what it wanted to tell her. It wanted to take her to the peak of the poisonous herb storage. There were many rare medicinal ingredients there, as well as several corrosive poisonous herbs that were only grown by the poison sect. They had been unknown for decades. Lil Thing stopped again, but Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue were too engrossed in their conversation to notice it. Stupid master. Stupid white-robed gentleman. Lil Thing rolled around in the thick vines before disappearing like a wisp of smoke. It had better go to the peak to fill its stomach first before looking for them. When faced with countless poisonous herbs, it might be hungry, but it would definitely endure until it found the most delicious one. Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue were startled by Lil Thing's rustling as it scurried away. They both turned to look at Gu. Unexpectedly, an expert like Gu had noticed the commotion just now. He was staring at the peak from afar with a grave expression, deep in thought. Sir Gu seems to be very familiar with this place, Gu Beiyue spoke up. Gu turned back with an unpleasant expression. Not familiars. Han Yunxi deliberately chuckled. This guy clearly knew how to avoid the guards and even led them through a few man-made traps. Who would believe him if he said he wasn't familiar with this place? There was a 99% chance that this guy was from the medical academy. As for who exactly he was, why didn't he show his face? Fine, she wasn't that interested in finding out. Right now, she was itching to step into the poisonous herb storage and fill up her detoxification system. Let's go in. As Han Yunxi spoke, she took large strides across the barren land. Gu Beiwei immediately followed with Gu Qishao bringing up the rear. With a grin, he asked, "Poison lass, how are you planning to experience this?" "I'm just looking around." Han Yunxi activated her detoxification system to scan for all kinds of poisons as she walked up. She really was just looking around. Of course, she immediately kept the good ones in her bag. Not to mention Gu. Even Gu Beiwei didn't believe that Han Yunxi was just here to explore. However, Han Yunxi walked all the way up the mountain and really only looked around. She didn't even stop to pick the poisonous herbs. What exactly was this woman here for? Just as Gu Beiwei and Gu were foolishly following her, Han Yunxi had already silently collected a lot of poisonous herbs. The detoxification system detected that the poisonous herbs at the peak were the strongest. She thought that the distribution of the poisonous herbs must be from weak to strong. In other words, the good stuff should be at the peak. Good stuff didn't necessarily mean that it was useful. Han Yunxi needed a lot of poisonous herbs to replenish her stock. She thought that she would be able to collect enough along the way. As they walked, Gu Beiwei was quiet. However, Gu couldn't stand it anymore. "Poison girl, are you here to climb the mountain?" He had thought that Han Yunxi would go crazy picking the herbs here. He didn't expect that this girl didn't touch anything. Han Yunxi tilted her head and smiled.
Yeah.
This girl. Gu smiled helplessly. "All right, I'll climb with you. But don't blame me for not reminding you. Once the sky turns dark, there will be 100 bugs roaming at night. It's very dangerous. We have to leave." Han Yunxi then became serious. Really? 100 bugs roaming at night referred to poisonous insects that came out in groups to look for food. For example, a large group of poisonous ants, poisonous lizards, and the like. This phenomenon would occur in any place with a lot of poisonous herbs. With so many poisonous herbs in the poisonous herb vault, one could only imagine how scary it would be at night. Han Yunxi only remembered this when Gu said this. She hesitated for a moment, but still said seriously, "I'm looking for some poisonous herbs with strong corrosiveness." Since she was already here, she might as well look for poisonous herbs related to perplexing butterfly illusion. Although she didn't understand perplexing butterfly illusion, based on its terrifying corrosiveness, there must be some highly corrosive poisonous herbs in the recipe. Naturally, Long Fei had his own reasons for coming here. All right, she had been using the detoxification system to look for highly corrosive poisonous herbs on the way here. She told herself that she wasn't being soft-hearted. It was just that she had promised him. Since she had to keep her word, she had to help him to the end. Replenishing the detoxification system's inventory and feeding the little one were the main things. The perplexing butterfly illusion was just a side benefit. "Do you need it?" Gu asked curiously. When he and Gu Beiwei stood together, the difference between the two was obvious. Gu Beiwei didn't ask about anything, but he asked about everything. Han Yunxi was about to answer when a vine suddenly darted out from behind her. Gu's first reaction was to push her away, and he cried out in alarm, "Be careful, man-eating vines." Unfortunately, it was too late. Han Yunxi was fine, but Gu himself was entangled. A large, pus-filled mouth grew out from the end of a thick vine, and it pounced on Gu. "No." Han Yunxi immediately shot out her needles, but who knew that a vine would suddenly appear in front of her, blocking her? Fortunately, Gu Beiwei hugged the vine with both hands. However, hugging could only buy him time. Gu's entire body was bound, and he couldn't use any of his abilities. Gu Beiwei could only hold on tightly. Han Yunxi, on the other hand, was in even more danger. Vines darted out one after another, and it looked like they were about to surround her. God knows if these man-eating vines had mutated. She had used many poisons, but they couldn't wither. Seeing this, Gu Beiwa frowned and was about to make a move. Who knew that at this moment, a black figure suddenly flew over, broke into the vine's encirclement, and hugged Han Yunxi. Long Fei Yi. Gu's mouth was about to be sealed by the vines, but he still managed to say this name. Yes, it was Long Fei Yi. He hugged Han Yunxi tightly, and with a sweep of his sword, he immediately cut off the vine's encirclement. However, he didn't save Gu. Instead, he glanced coldly at Gu Beiwa, carried Han Yunxi, and turned to leave. Han Yunxi was stunned at first, but she quickly recovered and exclaimed, "Quick, save Gu."
Quick.
Long Fei Ye's face was as cold as ice. He didn't answer her and walked down the mountain with Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi struggled with all her might. She was anxious.
Gu was trapped because of me.
Save him. If Gu didn't push her away, she would be in danger now. However, Long Fei Yi didn't even answer her. He looked straight ahead, and his whole person was so serious that it was terrifying. Let go of me. The panicked Han Yunxi suddenly realized that she didn't need Long Fei Yi. She could save people by herself. She had a lot of corrosive potions on her. Why didn't she think of that just now? Han Yunxi, a married woman going up the mountain with 2 men. What do you mean by this? Long Fei Yi questioned. Han Yunxi was stunned, and then anger rose in her heart. What right did he have to question her about this kind of thing? Didn't they say that they would go their separate ways? Let's save people first, okay? She suppressed her anger and asked seriously. God knows how long Gu Beiwa could hold on. Long Fei Yi was also angry. He didn't say anything and didn't look at her anymore. Han Yunxi was still struggling violently. In the end, they fought. Long Fei Yi landed on a tree trunk, holding her with one hand and dealing with her poison needles with the other. The two of them fought more and more fiercely. However, people with discerning eyes could see that Long Fei Yi had been giving in to Han Yunxi. Otherwise, how could she fight with him for so long? At this time, a cold female voice came from the side. Here, this is Han Yunxi. To the reader, the genius little poison concubine has a public WeChat account. If you don't know, you're out. Hurry up and add her to see what surprises there are. Account. Tyen Cakesy Adofi. Chapter 276. Year. Even Grand Concubine, he had never called Long Fei Yi by that name. Han Yunxi was stunned by the sudden voice. She unconsciously turned to look and saw a woman dressed in black. She was nearly 40 years old, but had a pretty face and a graceful figure. She didn't lose out to a girl in her early 20s. Add to that the lingering charm of age on her, and she exuded an indescribable charm. At first glance, she looked like a dignified and noble lady, but a closer look revealed her shrewd and ruthless eyes. This woman wasn't easy to deal with. Even though Han Yunxi had already seen her, she still examined Han Yunxi without batting an eyelid. Her gaze was wanton, and her aura was fierce. Long Fei Yi saw that Han Yunxi had spaced out and immediately withdrew his palm, afraid that he'd really hurt her. The woman saw all of this and suddenly broke into laughter. She mocked, "Yib, when did you learn to have tender, protective feelings for the fairer sex?" Long Fei Yi tightened his grip on Han Yunxi, his face expressionless. Instead of answering, he asked, "When did Aunt Ru get here? Where's Tang Li?" Aunt? Han Yunxi was surprised by the name, but Gu's life was at stake. She couldn't care less who this woman was. She lowered her voice and said, "Long Fei Yi, a life is at stake. Let go." Long Fei Yi ignored her, his attention on Aunt Ru as she drew closer and closer. Aunt Ru didn't answer Long Fei Yi's question, but focused on Han Yunxi. She'd long studied her from head to toe. Even though she was staring at Han Yunxi, she asked Long Fei Yi, "I heard her poison skills are very formidable. Was there anyone who looked down on someone like that?" Han Yunxi could feel Aunt Ru's lofty gaze. She knew this woman had come with ill intentions and was even more certain that she was the target. However, she didn't have the time to accompany him. She really did not have time to waste here. Not to mention that Gu would be eaten by the man-eating vines. Even Gu Beiwe would not be able to escape. She had to save them. Long Fei, can we talk about it later? Han Yunxi begged him. Her voice was so soft that Aunt Ru couldn't hear her. Unfortunately, Long Fei remained unmoved. His thoughts were all on Aunt Ru. He didn't introduce her or explain anything. He only said indifferently, "I'll come after I send her back." After he finished speaking, he hugged Han Yunxi tightly and was about to leave when Aunt Ru stretched out an arm to stop him. "Cold," she said. Why are you in such a hurry?" Han Yunxi was shocked. She dared to block Long Fei's way. This woman must have a powerful background. "It's getting late. Aunt Ru, if you don't reach the peak, you might have come in vain today," Long Fei said as he circled around Aunt Ru's arm and was about to leave. However, Aunt Ru grabbed Han Yunxi's shoulder and asked her directly, "Girl, is the perplexing butterfly illusion in your hands?" When she said this, Long Fei's ugly expression instantly darkened. Before he could say anything, Han Yunxi replied, "It has nothing to do with you. Let go of me." Unexpectedly, Aunt Ru suddenly exerted force on her shoulder and said sternly, "Uncultured girl, take it out." "Uncultured? Only an elder like you is allowed to look down on me for no reason and touch me? Respect is mutual. It's not like it's yours. Why should I?" Han Yunxi retorted unhappily. Aunt Ru was momentarily at a loss for words. She exerted more force on Han Yunxi's shoulder and ordered, "Take it out." Han Yunxi's shoulder was in so much pain. She took out a blue and white porcelain vase and casually tossed it behind her. "What kind of lousy toy is this? I don't care." Impudent. Aunt Ru was furious. She immediately let go of Han Yunxi and chased after her. At the same time, Long Fei, who was caught off guard, also let go of her and chased after her. Han Yunxi took advantage of this opportunity to escape, running madly in the direction they came from. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't curious about Aunt Ru's identity, but she couldn't afford to be curious now. "Gu Qishao, Gu Beiwe, nothing must happen to you too." She ran and ran and ran with all her might. Behind her, Aunt Ru picked up the blue and white porcelain vase, and her expression changed. She sneered meaningfully. "You actually dared to trick me? Very well." Without a doubt, that was just a similar vase and not the perplexing butterfly illusion. Han Yunxi didn't even take out the perplexing butterfly illusion at the Xian gold door, let alone now. That thing was given to her by Long Fei. She would only give it to Long Fei alone. Long Fei looked at the shattered vase on the ground. No matter how terrible his mood was, he couldn't help but smile. Even he himself didn't notice the hint of a smile that flitted across his lips. Aunt Ru glared fiercely at Long Fei, then immediately chased after Han Yunxi. This time, it was Long Fei who stopped her. "Aunt Ru, if there's anything, let's talk about it when we get back." Aunt Ru raised an eyebrow and coldly snorted. "What is it?" Tang Li confessed everything. What right does a woman who can't be used by you have to know about the existence of the perplexing butterfly illusion? What did that bastard Tang Li confess? About the Shadow Clan? Or something else? Long Fei didn't explain much since he didn't know the situation. He only said, "She doesn't know what the perplexing butterfly illusion is." Unexpectedly, Aunt Ru suddenly said sternly, "Anyone who knows the words perplexing butterfly illusion deserves to die." Saying this, she slapped Long Fei's hand away. Long Fei tried to stop her again, but he didn't waste any more words. His palm moved like it was doing Tai Chi, gently pushing Aunt Ru away. It looked like a gentle push, but the force behind it caused Aunt Ru to stagger a few steps and almost fall. By the time Aunt Ru steadied herself, Long Fei had already chased after Han Yunxi. "Yiber, you actually dared to push me for a useless woman?" Aunt Ru's face was full of shock. Her sharp eyes darkened as she immediately chased after him. After Han Yunxi ran back to her original spot, she was shocked by the scene in front of her. Gu and Gu Beiwe were nowhere to be seen. She also didn't see the man-eating vines that were madly baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. All she saw were two giant man-eating vines with their mouths wide open, or more accurately, two toothless mouths. They were lying on the ground, opening and closing. No matter how she looked at it, it was a comical sight. Where were they? Where were the vines? Where were the teeth? What exactly happened here?
Gu.
Gu Beiwe. Han Yunxi shouted. Master's voice. Lil Thing, who was hiding at the side and eating, immediately jumped up from the grass and squeaked twice, as if to say, Master, I'm here. Lil Thing. Han Yunxi was very surprised. She hurriedly ran over, but was immediately shocked again. She saw Lil Thing sitting on a pile of dead man-eating vines. One of the man-eating vine's fangs was in each hand, and it was eating with crunching sounds. Lil Thing's expression of enjoyment was not only not disgusting, it was extremely cute. It had to be said that Lil Thing was even more knowledgeable than the detoxification system. Man-eating vines were not poisonous, but their fangs were an important ingredient in making poison. Furthermore, the fangs of man-eating vines were not bones, but plants with high hardness. Han Yunxi heaved a sigh of relief. Where are Gu Beiwe and Gu? If Lil Thing could eat so leisurely here, it meant that the two guys were fine. Lil Thing had saved them. Lil Thing was busy eating and ignored Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi picked it up and asked again, Where are they? Lil Thing looked up, but unexpectedly, it suddenly broke free from Han Yunxi's hand and burrowed into the medical bag, as if it was frightened by something. It even threw away the half-eaten fangs of the man-eating vines. What's wrong? Han Yunxi was puzzled. Soon, Long Fei Ye's fierce voice came from behind. Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi was shocked and quickly let go of the hand that was pressing on the medical bag. She calmed down and looked back. Where are Gu Beiwe and Gu? Long Fei Yu is such a powerful person. He could tell that something was wrong with this place with a simple sweep of his eyes, especially that toothless man-eating vines. Han Yunxi didn't answer him. She pulled out the real perplexing butterfly illusion from her sleeve and handed it over. Here. Long Fei Yi stared at the perplexing butterfly illusion, his hands gradually clenching into fists. It was obvious that he was furious. This woman didn't know what was good for her. Seeing that Long Fei Yi didn't move, Han Yunxi stepped forward and was about to shove the perplexing butterfly illusion into his hands. Right at this moment, a sharp hidden needle suddenly appeared from the side with irresistible force. Long Fei Yi pulled Han Yunxi into his arms and hugged her tightly before turning around to leave. Yer, stop right there. Aunt Ru shouted as she chased after them. Long Fei Yi turned a deaf ear and didn't even look back. Aunt Ru was furious. She sent out several hidden weapons, including hidden needles, hidden darts, small throwing knives, and all sorts of other hidden weapons. Long Fei Yi kept dodging. In a situation where he didn't retaliate, he was actually having trouble holding his own. He could only choose the path up the mountain. There were many trees on the path up the mountain, so hidden weapons wouldn't be as effective. Han Yunxi was tightly protected in his arms. She wanted to turn around several times to take a look, but Long Fei Yi was hugging her too tightly. She couldn't move at all. She always thought that she had enough poisonous needles on her body. She didn't expect that someone would be able to hide so many hidden weapons. Moreover, it wasn't just one type, but all sorts of hidden weapons. She always thought that Tang Li's hidden weapon techniques were powerful enough. She didn't expect this woman to be so powerful. She forced Long Fei Yi to choose the path up the mountain.
She must be from the Tang sect.
Aunt Ru? Could she be Long Fei Ye's aunt? His birth mother's sister? Thinking up to here, Han Yunxi gave a start and grew inexplicably nervous. At the same time, she wanted to turn around to take a look. One chased, one ran, while the other chased. An endless stream of hidden weapons rained down. Fortunately, this was Long Fei. Anyone else would have been injured by such a high-intensity attack, but Long Fei remained unscathed. Finally, Aunt Ru lost her temper and said sternly, Fei, stop right there.
Do you hear me?
Long Fei ignored her and kept going up the mountain. Before they knew it, they'd already reached the top of the mountain. The top of this mountain was different from other mountain peaks. Most mountain peaks were sharp, and only a small hill was left at the top. However, this mountain peak was flat. It was a dense forest, with tall trees densely standing. Only 1 or 2 people could pass between the trees. The entire forest was like a maze, and once you entered, you would not be able to find your way. Long Fei stopped outside the woodland, hesitating to enter. Meanwhile, Han Yunxi was immersed in the detox system, which kept reminding her of the presence of highly corrosive poisons nearby. Most likely, Long Fei had asked her to come with him to the poison grounds because he wanted to find poisonous plants at the top of the mountain. Han Yunxi used the detox system to find the source of the poison. Since we're already here, I might as well tell him. But before Han Yunxi could determine the direction, Aunt Ru caught up to them. Chapter 277. When Aunt Ru arrived, so did the hidden weapon. Xiao. With a sharp sound, a 5-star dart flew from behind them, fiercely hitting the tree trunk diagonally across from them. Han Yunxi subconsciously looked over, but before she could see clearly, the hidden dart that had been stuck in the tree trunk actually bounced back and accurately shot towards Han Yunxi. Long Fei had expected the dart to bounce back, but he didn't expect it to be so fast. He couldn't dodge in time, so he used his other hand to block it for Han Yunxi. The 5-star dart instantly shot into his arm, but it didn't hit the tree. The entire dart actually sank into his flesh. The refracted dart actually had such power. This fighting style was so ruthless. It must be very painful. Han Yunxi's brows furrowed, but Long Fei didn't even frown. He didn't hesitate and directly charged into the forest. However, as soon as he charged in, Aunt Ru shouted, "Yi-er, come out." All these years, she had secretly snuck into the main peak of Lotus Flower Peak. She had practically walked through the entire mountain, but she didn't dare to enter this forest. This time, if she didn't know Yi-er was coming, she wouldn't have come. This was a labyrinthine forest. Once they couldn't get out, once they were trapped until the sky turned dark and the insects moved at night, then they could only lose their lives in the forest. Yi-er, come out immediately. Yi-er, if you have something to say, come out first. Aunt Ru shouted, but unfortunately, Long Fei didn't turn back. He walked further and further away, his back becoming more and more blurry. Aunt Ru was scared and immediately chased after him. If she was any later, she probably wouldn't be able to find him. As soon as they entered the forest, Aunt Ru didn't use any hidden weapons, and Long Fei also slowed down. As soon as she caught up to them, Aunt Ru firmly grabbed Long Fei's hand. "While we can still distinguish the path, immediately come out with me. Since we're here, we might as well look around." Long Fei indifferently said, "Yi-er, you're crazy. There's still 6 more hours before the sky turns dark." Aunt Ru said angrily. Although she came here often, she wouldn't take the risk to come here before she found a way to deal with the 100 bugs. Aunt Ru was no longer as tough and cold as before. Instead, she was more worried and anxious. However, Long Fei said, "If Aunt Ru is afraid, you can leave first." Aunt Ru was dumbfounded. Yi-er had been cold to her for more than 10 years, but he had never spoken to her so impudently. She rushed to Long Fei's side and swept her resentful gaze over Han Yunxi, who had been held in his arms this entire time. She warned sternly, "Fei, your life isn't something you can throw away so easily. Come back with me immediately." Han Yunxi didn't understand what Aunt Ru meant, but she clearly felt Long Fei's hand stiffen for a while. After a long time, Long Fei did not say anything. He protected Han Yunxi and turned around. Only then did Aunt Ru exhale in relief. "Let's go." But it was then that the silent Han Yunxi spoke up. "You're looking for highly corrosive poisonous plants, right?" Aunt Ru ignored her, but Long Fei stopped. "What did you find?" "It's nearby," Han Yunxi was certain. She had been silently searching for it the entire time. It was nearby, and it was highly corrosive. Although she couldn't tell what kind of plant it was, she could detect its toxicity. "Are you sure?" Long Fei rejoiced. Heaven knows how much he wanted to break through the perplexing butterfly illusion. Nearby, Aunt Rue looked disdainful. Aside from the perfectly straight trees in the surroundings, there were no other poisonous plants. Moreover, these trees were all poisonous birches with no corrosive properties. Han Yunxi was simply spouting nonsense. After Han Yunxi married into the Duke of Qin's estate, Aunt Rue had gone into closed-door cultivation. A few days ago, she'd gone to the Duke of Qin's estate to find out what had happened. Originally, she assumed that Grand Concubine Yi would play that useless piece of trash Han Yunxi to death as soon as she married into the Duke of Qin's estate. She never expected her to replace Grand Concubine Yi and take charge of the Duke of Qin's estate, much less know how to treat poisons and save many lives. When she found out from Chu Shifeng that Yi was planning to ascend Lotus Peak, she immediately ran over to stop him. As soon as she ran into Tang Li, she tied him up and interrogated him. Only then did she find out that Han Yunxi's poison skills were only average and wouldn't be of much help to Fei. She was also entangled with other men, but Yi had actually given her the perplexing butterfly illusion. This type of woman had average skills, but her methods were brilliant. Heaven knows how she'd managed to hook up with Yi. As soon as she arrived, she saw Fei and Han Yunxi fooling around. She almost thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. Ever since he was young, when had Yi ever played, laughed, or joked around with anyone? Heaven knows what methods Han Yunxi had used to confuse Yi's eyes. A woman like this would only delay a man's plans. It's nearby. I'll look for it, it won't take too long, Han Yunxi said seriously. Long Fei Yu was right. Since they were already here, there was no reason to go back empty-handed. Aunt Rue's face was stern. If you want to look for it yourself. We don't have time to deal with you. Yi come with me? Hearing this, Han Yunxi lost her temper. Who wants to look for it? It's not like the perplexing butterfly illusion is mine. Do you think I have nothing better to do? You were the one who said to look for it just then?
Who told you to look for it?
Aunt Rue retorted. Han Yunxi gave a start. Indeed, no one had told her to look for it. She was probably too angry to think otherwise. Long Fei spoke up. I told her to look for it. Han Yunxi's heart trembled slightly. She glanced at Long Fei Yi from the corner of her eye. Seeing that Long Fei Yi was looking at her, she hurriedly averted her gaze. Aunt Rue was flustered and exclaimed angrily, There's no way it's nearby. Yi, do you believe Aunt Rue or her? Long Fei Yi avoided Aunt Rue's angry gaze. Han Yunxi, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and look for it. Without a doubt, he had made his choice. Aunt Rue was greatly disappointed. She had taught him for more than 10 years, but she couldn't compare to a woman he had known for less than a year. Aunt Rue took a deep breath and calmed down. Han Yunxi, I'll give you the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. She had to calm down and try to leave this forest as soon as possible. Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi said, No need, I've already found it. Aunt Rue frowned. She didn't believe Han Yunxi, but she also didn't believe that Han Yunxi would dare to brag so much. Aunt Rue chose to remain silent. Where is it? Long Fei Yi didn't even need to think before believing her. Han Yunxi glanced over, and their eyes met before they both looked away. Han Yunxi didn't speak, but walked to the right. Long Fei Yi and Aunt Rue hastened to catch up. Han Yunxi stopped in front of a large tree, her gaze resting on its trunk. Where is it? This was the first time Aunt Rue had been so impatient. Split open the trunk and take a look, Han Yunxi said seriously. This is a poison birch tree, Aunt Rue reminded her immediately. After Fei's mother passed away, she was the most knowledgeable about poisons in the Tang clan.
I know.
Long Fei Yi, hurry and split it open. Be careful, Han Yunxi said as she backed up a few steps. At this moment, Lil Thing, who had been curled up in the medical pouch, poked its head out. As soon as it saw Long Fei Yi point his sword at the trunk, it shrank back in fear. How did this swordsman know there was a secret passage hidden in the trunk? Didn't he know that it led to the underground poison storehouse? The storehouse was divided into above ground and underground. The above ground contained poisonous plants, while the underground contained poisonous water. Once it was destroyed, the storehouse would be finished. Lil Thing wanted to crawl out and bite that man's hand so he could never hold a sword again. But it was still afraid. It didn't know why, but it was instinctively afraid of him. I'll draw a circle to curse him. While Lil Thing was drawing circles on the ground, Long Fei had already done as Han Yunxi said and split open the tree trunk with his sword. Only then did they realize that the trunk was empty and a sour scent assaulted their nostrils. Long Fei Yi was about to look into the hole when Aunt Ru called out to stop him. Yi, be careful of poison. But Han Yunxi only said, this smell isn't poisonous, don't worry. Aunt Ru was embarrassed and didn't know what to say. She just coughed a few times. Although they hadn't seen any corrosive poisonous plants, Han Yunxi didn't seem to be lying. Although she didn't like Yi Er's trust in Han Yunxi, Aunt Ru wasn't an unreasonable person, nor was she a simple-minded girl. She quickly realized that she had been deceived by Tang Li. Han Yunxi had only used her eyes to look and didn't use any other methods to find the trunk. She was really capable. It looked like she had to reevaluate Han Yunxi. Long Fei Yi quickly discovered the secret in the trunk. There's a secret passage leading to the underground. It's very deep. Aunt Ru and Han Yunxi came over at the same time. Just as Aunt Ru was about to speak, Han Yunxi said first, let's go down. Aunt Ru was just about to say the same thing. She had searched for so many years. Now that she had a clue, how could she not go down? She had already thrown the matter of the 100 insects parade to the back of her mind. Perhaps the thing she wanted would be under this tree hole. She looked at Han Yunxi, a trace of admiration flashing through her eyes. She didn't expect that this girl would have the guts to agree with her and also have the guts to take such a risk. Very good. It looked like she wasn't a paper tiger anymore. Aunt Ru was the first to jump into the cave, followed by Han Yunxi. She was quite excited. Although that sour smell wasn't poisonous, she felt that something was wrong just by smelling it. Perhaps it wasn't poisonous because it wasn't concentrated enough. Perhaps they could find clues to decipher the perplexing butterfly illusion under the tree hole. Han Yunxi said very seriously, I'll walk in front later. Everyone be careful. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi didn't come in immediately. He looked at Han Yunxi and asked, Han Yunxi, are you sure you want to go down with this prince? She had already jumped in, so what did he mean by that? She had said before that she wouldn't come and help anymore. She had even returned the perplexing butterfly illusion to him. However, she had come, helped, and was so excited. Han Yunxi's ears reddened. She was both embarrassed and angry. She hesitated, but just as she was about to jump out, Long Fei Yi jumped into the tree hole first. He said indifferently, I'll walk in front with you. Han Yunxi didn't have the chance to refuse, because Long Fei Yi took her hand. Aunt Ru walked behind them. As she looked at their tightly interlocked fingers, a complicated look flashed through her eyes. She didn't understand why Tang Li would lie and slander this woman. Chapter 278. Long Fei Yi held Han Yunxi's hand and walked in front while Aunt Ru followed behind. The path down the tree trunk grew steeper and steeper until it turned into a vertical passage. Long Fei Yi jumped down with Han Yunxi in his arms. Aunt Ru followed closely behind, but they ended up in an underground stone room. Night pearls illuminated the surroundings, but the stone room was empty. There was only a door leading to an unknown place, and the sour smell in the air was much stronger than it had been above. Long Fei Yi landed with Han Yunxi in his arms, but he didn't let go of her. Instead, he took her hand again. Han Yunxi's gaze drifted to the hand he was holding. She moved slightly, trying to break free, but Long Fei Yi only tightened his grip. Han Yunxi furrowed her brows and looked at him, but he didn't look at her. She could only see the side of his face. The lines on his face seemed to have been carved, handsome and cold, stern and domineering. Han Yunxi stared at him for a while before trying to break free again. She didn't know if Long Fei Yi knew she was watching, but he was cold and domineering. He ignored her and didn't let go of her hand. In the end, Han Yunxi was defeated. Too lazy to argue, she let him be. Aunt Ru saw all of this. She decided to go back and properly interrogate Tang Li and Han Yunxi about what was going on between them. Yi-er was someone who wanted to accomplish great things. Even if Han Yunxi was of great use to him, he couldn't fall in love with her. Love would only make things worse. Yi-er's Mufei had long warned him that even if it was the person closest to him, as long as it was for the sake of his cause, he had to kill them if necessary and abandon them if necessary. To build a palace here, this must be an important place for the poison sect, Aunt Ru said seriously. Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi ignored her and walked towards the only door in the stone room. Aunt Ru looked at their backs and opened her mouth, but she didn't know what to say. She could only follow. After exiting the stone room, there was a stone path. The stone path was very long, and at the end of the path, there would be a turn. The sour smell in the air gradually became stronger. Rather than calling this place an underground secret palace, it would be better to call it a tomb. An hour later, they found that the end of the road was not a turn, but a stone door. Inside the door, the light of a luminous pearl was even brighter than the outside. At this moment, Han Yunxi stopped in her tracks. There's poisonous gas inside. It's purple miasma. Aunt Ru was curious. The place where they stood was still some distance away from the stone door, so she did not notice. How did Han Yunxi know? If Aunt Ru hadn't seen Han Yunxi's abilities, she definitely wouldn't have believed it. But now she believed it. This is the only way, Long Fei spoke up. His meaning was clear, they had to go. Aunt Ru hastily explained. Purple miasma was one of the weakest types of miasma. Its toxicity was so weak that it was almost negligible. It would only cause the victim to feel dizzy. There was no antidote for this poison, nor did it need one. Once inhaled, the victim would be fine as long as they rested in a place with clean air. Based on our strength, this doesn't count as poison, Aunt Ru said confidently. After understanding the situation, Long Fei Yi prepared to enter, without another word. Han Yunxi silently followed, but stopped at the door.
Wait.
She took out 3 small packets of medicinal herbs from her medical pouch and gave one each to Long Fei Yi and Aunt Ru. She kept one for herself. This counts as an antidote. Just put it in your mouth and chew it. Aunt Ru opened it and immediately recognized that it was a fresh mint leaf. She asked suspiciously, "There's an antidote for purple miasma?" Ever since her sister passed away, she devoted herself to the study of poisons. She read through all of her sister's books. Miasma is the most common poison, but she has never heard of an antidote. Poisons without an antidote and those that don't need an antidote are the most terrifying poisons. The best way to deal with them is not to force yourself, but to prevent them. Mint isn't an antidote, but it can prevent purple miasma from entering the human respiratory system. Otherwise, once the concentration of purple miasma exceeds the threshold, it will become an incurable poison. Han Yunxi explained as she tossed the mint leaf into her mouth. She took the opportunity to break free from Long Fei Yi's grip and walked towards the stone door. Looking at her confident and carefree figure, Long Fei Yi's mind wandered. Aunt Ru couldn't help but whisper, "Yi-er, who did she learn her poison skills from?" "I've never heard of the Han family knowing poison skills." "An expert," Long Fei Yi answered without thinking. "An expert?" Aunt Ru was puzzled. "Who?" "The expert doesn't allow me to say." Long Fei popped the leaf into his mouth and chewed it before immediately following after Han Yunxi, leaving Aunt Ru at a loss. "An expert?" "There are only a few experts in the poison world today." "Who is it? Does Yi-er have to hide it from her?" As they approached the stone door, Aunt Ru sensed that there was not only purple miasma behind the door, but it was also very thick. She secretly rejoiced that Han Yunxi had been careful. Otherwise, they would have fainted the moment they entered such a thick miasma. Han Yunxi was about to enter when Long Fei grabbed her hand again and firmly entwined his fingers with hers. This time, Han Yunxi abruptly turned back to look at him, her eyes clear and bright as she stared at him with open and honest eyes. She just stared at him, without saying a word. This was clearly a question, or perhaps she was giving him a chance to explain. However, Long Fei Yi glanced at Aunt Ru from the corner of his eye. Not only did he not answer Han Yunxi, he even avoided her gaze. Han Yunxi frowned and suddenly flung her hand away. This time, Long Feiyi was caught off guard and was flung away by her. Long Feiyi, you can hold hands in some situations, but you can't simply interlock your fingers. Don't you understand the meaning of interlocking fingers? Han Yunxi flung away Long Feiyi's hand and strode through the stone door. Long Feiyi was stunned on the spot. It was Aunt Ru who followed in, but the moment she entered, she exclaimed, "Yi er." Long Feiyi hurriedly entered and saw a large stone room behind the stone door. Under the dual effects of the luminous pearl and purple miasma, the entire stone room was dyed purple. In the hazy purple mist, they saw 5 open stone doors facing them, each leading to different unknown places. They had walked all the way here, but such a situation had occurred. Aunt Ru tried all 5 stone doors and found that the acidic smell in the air was the same in all 5 directions. She subconsciously turned back to look at Han Yunxi. At this moment, Han Yunxi's brows were tightly knitted as she scanned the 5 stone doors. However, the detoxification system reminded her that there was no poison in any of them. 5 choices were placed in front of them. What should they do? Should we split up? Aunt Ru asked.
No.
Long Feiyi immediately rejected. This was the most time-saving method, but it was also the most dangerous. Han Yunxi, what do you think? Long Fei asked. They'd been walking for 2 hours now before he finally spoke. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi didn't even look at him. She only shook her head. I don't know. I can't sense any poison. She was still cautious. The acidic smell in the air was getting thicker, but she couldn't detect any poison. However, this didn't mean that there wasn't any corrosive poison in the air. It only meant that she couldn't detect it. If the acidic smell here was related to the perplexing butterfly illusion, then the detoxification system that couldn't detect the perplexing butterfly illusion might not be able to detect the poison here either. She silently told herself not to be distracted by anything. She had to maintain a high level of vigilance. The moment she showed signs of being poisoned, she had to retreat immediately. 6 paths. 5 in front and 1 behind. The front path led to unknown lands and unknown dangers. The back path led back to where they'd come from. In the end, they had to make a choice. Han Yunxi and Aunt Ru couldn't give them any suggestions, so Long Feiyi didn't delay. He was about to head for the first door when a woman and 2 men suddenly appeared. The 2 men were in a sorry state, as if they'd been burned by fire. Their clothes were tattered, and their hair was disheveled. Although the woman was protected, she was also in a mess. Even so, Han Yunxi recognized the trio at a glance. Their features were deep and imposing, their stature tall and powerful. This was Western Zhou's crown prince, Duanmu Bei. He had slanted eyebrows that reached his temples and a heroic air about him. This was Western Zhou's famous general, Chu Tianyin. Han Yunxi didn't recognize him, but she knew who he was from the expensive ebony bow on his back. As for the woman, she had a pretty face and a cold expression. She too carried a bow on her back, giving off a lofty air. This should be Chu Tianyin's younger sister, the Chu clan's famous icy beauty, Chu Qingge. Duanmu Bei and Chu Tianyin both gave a start at the sight of Han Yunxi's group. For a moment, they exchanged glances, each with their own thoughts. The atmosphere grew tense. It wasn't strange to see Duanmu Yao and Crown Prince Yi in Medical City. This crown prince was famous for doting on his little sister and often accompanied her by her side. But seeing him in a place like this was worth thinking about. How did he know about this place? What was he doing here? It wasn't very likely that they knew about the perplexing butterfly illusion. Han Yunxi not only examined Duanmu Bei, but Chu Tianyin as well. The Chu clan was a famous clan in Western Zhou. It was common knowledge throughout Cloud Realm continent that the Chu clan had produced great generals. Chu Tianyin was one of the Chu clan's newest great generals and was even more famous than Tianning's Mu Qinggu. His archery skills were said to be the best in Cloud Realm continent. On the battlefield, a single bow from him could kill a line of 10 soldiers. Why had someone like him come here with Duanmu Bei? Han Yunxi was still wondering when Long Fei Yi suddenly grabbed her hand again. Not only that, but he pulled her behind him, as if to protect her. After all, Western Zhou and Tianning were allied by marriage, but he didn't have a good relationship with Duanmu Bei. Add that to the fact that Duanmu Yao's recent marriage had caused Duanmu Bei to hold a grudge against him. Moreover, this was the poison sect's forbidden underground palace. Both sides were thieves, so nothing that happened here would spread. There was no Duke of Qin or Crown Prince Yi here, only enemies. Currently, Duanmu Bei and Chu Tianyin were also examining Han Yunxi's group. Compared to Chu Tianyin's low-key demeanor, Duanmu Bei was much more arrogant. He glanced at Aunt Ru, but didn't take it to heart. Instead, he murmured to Chu Tianyin, Han Yunxi doesn't know martial arts, so our chances of victory are high. You and I will keep Long Fei Yi occupied while Chinga takes 2 of the girls to test the remaining 4 doors. Chapter 279. Duanmu Bei's group had been here for a long time, but they had no choice but to try them one by one. Who knew that they'd lose so badly at the very first door? They walked for an entire day without seeing anything until a huge fire suddenly erupted at the end of the path. Fortunately, they'd escaped in time, or else the 2 of them would have been burned to ashes long ago. Of the 5 doors, only one held the thing they wanted. The others all had fatal traps. Duanmu Bei was a very arrogant and high-profile person, but he was always on guard against Long Fei Yi. This time, it wasn't because he was arrogant, but because Chu Tianyin and Chu Qingge were present. The Chu clan's archery skills had always been used on the battlefield, but rarely in private fights. Still, they weren't inferior in any way. At least, as Duanmu Bei saw it, Chu Tianyin's archery skills were enough to resist Long Fei Yi's sword skills. Duanmu Bei was very anxious, but the Chu siblings weren't. Chu Qingge's cold gaze was fixed on Han Yunxi, a shrewd glint in her eyes. Aren't you curious as to why they're here? Chu Tianyin's voice was low and magnetic. They must be here for that thing as well. Let's subdue Long Fei Yi first and get the thing. It won't be too late to ask the rest after that. If this was in the past, Duanmu Bei would have drawn his sword as soon as he saw Han Yunxi humiliating Duanmu Yao in Medical City. What kind of thing could make him put aside Yao Yao, who he loves the most, for a while? It was the poison sect's treasury. Duanmu Bei had no understanding of Medical City or poisons. In recent years, he'd made few connections with outside powers because he was busy fighting for the throne. This time, he'd come to chase after Duanmu Yao. He'd been the first to find out that Duanmu Yao was in cahoots with the Duke of Kong. For the sake of coaxing her back, he'd come to Medical City himself. Unexpectedly, Chu Tianyin and Chu Qingge sought him out of their own accord on his first day in Medical City. They told him that the poison sect's forbidden grounds contained a huge pile of treasures left behind by the poison sect in the past. He had been fighting for the throne with his brothers for many years and had spent a lot of money. He had long been embarrassed. Moreover, once he ascended the throne, he would need a large sum of money to buy the hearts of the soldiers. Cooperating with Chu Tianyin had long been his dream, not to mention cooperating to make money. He didn't think twice before following the Chu siblings here. As he saw it, Long Fei's group had to be here for the treasury as well. Today, even if he had to join forces with the Chu siblings to kill Long Fei Yi, he still had to obtain that treasury. Duanmu Bei's hand was already on his sword, ready to attack. However, Chu Tianyin said in a low voice, "At most, we can only tie with them. Han Yunxi doesn't know martial arts, and that woman doesn't look like she's trained." "What are you afraid of?" Duanmu Bei asked unhappily. "Han Yunxi knows poison," Chu Tianyin said in a low voice. "Doesn't Qingge know it too?" Duanmu Bei retorted. If he hadn't come back this time, he wouldn't have known that Chu Qingge was not only skilled in archery, but poisons as well. If she hadn't made them chew on mint leaves, they wouldn't have been able to survive in the violet miasma for so long. At this moment, the quiet Chu Qingge finally spoke up. Although she used honorifics, her tone was Qingge. Qingge has long wanted to compete with her. Han Yunxi had only used the ebony bow to determine Chu Qingge's identity, but Chu Qingge had been investigating her for a long time. Qingge, Chu Tianyin scolded. But Duanmu Bei simply unsheathed his sword. Long Fei Yi, Han Yunxi, you hurt Yao Yao so badly. Hand over your lives. Duanmu Bei's sword was so fast that even Chu Qingge couldn't block it. Han Yunxi truly looked down on Duanmu Bei. If he wanted to fight, he could fight, but he even used Duanmu Yao as an excuse. It was disgusting to hear. Long Fei Yi didn't think much of Duanmu Bei at all, much less fight him. He protected Han Yunxi as they retreated, his attention on the Chu siblings. Aunt Ru didn't move either, but secretly shot out a dart. With a clang, Duanmu Bei's sword was broken in half. Duanmu Bei looked at the broken sword in his hand, then at Aunt Ru. He realized that he'd underestimated her. But he didn't promise anything. Instead, he flew into a rage out of humiliation and said coldly, Chu Tianyin, this crown prince orders you to attack. Before Chu Tianyin could make a move, Chu Qingge had already unsheathed her bow and aimed it at Han Yunxi, who was behind Long Fei Yi. You're seeking death. Long Fei Yi simply unsheathed the whip at his waist. He didn't even bother to draw his sword. As she looked at Long Fei Yi, Chu Qingge's eyes flashed with pain. But she hid it so well that no one noticed. She drew her bow to its full length. Seeing this, Duanmu Bei had no choice but to join in. He too unsheathed his bow and stood to one side, aiming at Long Fei Yi from another direction. Seeing this, Aunt Ru immediately drew close to Long Fei Yi, standing back to back with Han Yunxi between them. The Chu clan's archery skills lived up to their reputation. They couldn't afford to be careless. Seeing this, Duanmu Bei tossed aside his broken sword and stood on the other side, his voice cold. Leave Han Yunxi to me. As expected, Crown Prince Yi was known for his despicable ways. This was the first time that Han Yunxi felt such a strong urge to poison someone. 3 against 3. The atmosphere grew even more tense. Don't worry, Long Fei Yi said in a low voice. He glanced at Chu Tianyin out of the corner of his eye. Of the 3 of them, he was the only one who held Chu Tianyin in high regard. He'd experienced his swordsmanship once before. Judging from the current situation, they wouldn't lose, but their chances of winning weren't high either. Amidst the tense atmosphere, Chu Qingge suddenly said coldly, Han Yunxi, if you have the guts, stand out. Don't tell me you're used to hiding behind men? This was a provocation. The smart Han Yunxi immediately understood. She knew poisons and assassination weapons, but she was the only one present who didn't know martial arts. Duanmu Bei and the rest were more than happy for her to stand out. This icy beauty wasn't all looks and no brains. She looked impulsive but was actually quite shrewd. What, are you jealous? Why don't you hide back too? Han Yunxi replied with a grin. Jealous? That's right, she was about to go crazy with jealousy. Chu Qingge almost shot the arrow in her hand, but she kept her cool. Instead of showing anger, she smiled and said, no wonder Princess Duan said you were a burden to the Duke of Qin. You'll only drag him down. It looks like Princess Duan isn't trying to frame you out of jealousy after all. At these words, Han Yunxi felt unwell all over. If this was any other time, she would have calmly retorted even if she heard that name 10 times over. But she and Long Fei Yi were currently in a cold war because of that very name. Very good, Chu Qingge. I've decided that you're Duanmu Yao's best friend. Han Yunxi hadn't planned to fight in the first place. She could tell that their chances of winning weren't high, but this time she really got angry. What? Does Miss Chu want to fight me one-on-one? Han Yunxi asked coldly. Everyone assumed that she'd stand out, but didn't expect her to say one-on-one. Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi. She's an archer with high martial art skills. Are you looking to die? Long Fei Yi didn't speak, but he tightened his grip on Han Yunxi's hand, afraid that she'd break free. Chu Qingge couldn't wait to see that happen. She didn't even answer, but took 3 steps forward to provoke Han Yunxi. But Han Yunxi surprised everyone once again. I don't know martial arts, much less archery. What are you planning to fight one-on-one? Hearing this, Long Fei Ye's pursed lips twitched into a smile. Aunt Rue, on the other hand, laughed out loud. Of course it's a competition of martial arts and archery. How else would I win against you? In the face of a powerful enemy, Han Yunxi was more than happy to play along with Aunt Rue, even if she didn't have a good impression of her. She asked Chu Chingas seriously, "Really? In a one-on-one duel, only the winner and loser mattered. As long as both sides were willing, it was fine. Who cared what the other knew?" But Han Yunxi and Aunt Rue were singing the same tune to make it seem like Chu Chinga was bullying her. Chu Chinga's face alternated between red and white. In the end, she unwillingly released the arrow. "Chinga." Duanmu Bei immediately tried to stop her, but Chu Chinga's ambitions were too high. She said coldly, "Then what do you want to fight one-on-one?" Han Yunxi was amused. Aside from martial arts and archery, what else did Chu Chinga specialize in? She was about to speak when the silent Chu Tianyin suddenly spoke up. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, can you listen to this one for a moment?" Everyone could tell that Chu Tianyin had no intention of fighting. Long Fei Yi pulled Han Yunxi's hand behind his back and held her back with his other hand. Han Yunxi knew that Long Fei would give Chu Tianyin face after being surrounded by his two arms. As expected, he said coldly, "Speak." "Chinga and Qin Wangfei will fight one-on-one. If Chinga wins, I ask that your Highness Duke of Qin make things easy for us and leave this place. If Chinga loses, we'll leave."
How's that?
Chu Tianyin said seriously. Chu Tianyin had gotten to the point. He was very clear that everyone was here for the secret behind the 5 doors. If they were evenly matched, no one would be able to get what they wanted. A one-on-one duel was a good idea. One-on-one for what? Long Fei Yi agreed. Poisons. Duanmu Bei said hastily, even if it meant exposing Chu Chinga's poison skills. Chu Chinga knew poisons, so they knew it was her idea to use mint leaves against the violet miasma. Han Yunxi was surprised, but she was more than willing to compete in poisons. Still, Chu Tianyin immediately refused. "Let's see who can emerge unscathed from the 5 doors. You can choose whichever door you want." The moment these words came out, everyone became alert. Han Yunxi couldn't help but have a whole new level of respect for Chu Tianyin. He really was something. This way, not only would they resolve Chu Chinga's predicament, but they'd also avoid a direct confrontation. It was all about luck, while whether or not they could escape depended on their own skills. "Your Highness Duke of Qin, this is the fairest method. What do you think?" Chu Tianyin asked modestly. Compared to Duanmu Bei and Chu Chinga, Chu Tianyin was far too formidable. His smile was like a knife cutting through flesh, a needle cutting through marrow and tendons. Although he looked modest and polite, he was hard to deal with. Indeed, this was the fairest method, so it was hard to refuse. Long Fei Yi admired Chu Tianyin very much, but he wasn't planning to agree. Han Yunxi's overall strength couldn't compare to Chu Chinga's, and no one knew what dangers lurked behind the 5 doors. He was about to refuse when Han Yunxi nodded. All right. Even Chu Chinga had said that she was a burden to Long Fei Yi. How could she let Long Fei Yi reject Chu Tianyin now? Chapter 280. Chu Chinga couldn't wait for Han Yunxi to agree. As soon as she heard Han Yunxi say "all right," she immediately asked, "Which of the 4 remaining doors will you choose?" Her anxious expression made it seem like she was afraid that Han Yunxi would change her mind. Han Yunxi didn't, but said openly, "You choose first." "No need." Chu Chinga was very proud. Han Yunxi was too lazy to argue with her. She shrugged her shoulders and asked, "Will you choose the 2nd door or not?" "I'll choose the 3rd." Chu Chinga replied immediately. Actually, the choice of door wasn't the most important thing to her. The most important thing was that Han Yunxi would be at a disadvantage in a duel like this. Of the 4 doors, only one held the thing they wanted. The other 3 were all filled with traps like the first one, and led to a dead end. She refused to believe that Han Yunxi would be lucky enough to pick the right door. Even if she did, she'd still run into traps, perhaps the most terrifying of them all. No matter what, It was impossible for her to escape unscathed. She didn't know martial arts, so she was slower than others when it came to escaping. She might even lose her life here. Of course, Chu Chinga wasn't completely certain that she'd come out unscathed, but she'd rather be injured than risk Han Yunxi's life. At the very least, Han Yunxi's injuries would be worse than hers. Chu Chinga strode to the third door and added coldly, "The time limit is 1 hour. If you can't get out in time, you lose. The one with the most serious injuries loses."
All right.
Han Yunxi agreed easily. She tried to break free of Long Fei's grip, but Long Fei held on tightly, his expression frightening. This woman who's acting on her own is simply seeking death. "Let go," Han Yunxi said in a low voice. Long Fei wouldn't let go. He was already planning to go back on his word. Rather than risk Han Yunxi's life, he'd rather go all out and fight. But Han Yunxi looked up and said, "Let go and don't worry, all right? Trust me just this once." Let go and be at ease? Han Yunxi, so you actually knew that this prince had a heart. It's good that you know. Since he had the heart, how could he let it go? Long Fei still did not let go. Han Yunxi was helpless. Long Fei, when have I ever lied to you? When have I ever disappointed you? Indeed, she did so well every time. Whether it was her own matters or his, she handled them perfectly. There was basically nothing to nitpick about. Even when she was in great danger, she could turn misfortune into fortune. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, everyone was waiting, but Long Fei did not care. In the end, what made him let go was the confidence and determination in Han Yunxi's eyes. He lowered his voice and unconsciously softened it. "Be careful. If there's no other way, come out. This prince is right at the door." Just like when they left the inn, he had also told her that he would always be in Medical City. He thought that this woman must have discovered something again, or perhaps she had already found the right passage. Every time, she was always full of surprises. Aunt Ru wanted to persuade him as well, but when she saw Long Fei let go, she didn't say anything. When she saw Han Yunxi and Long Fei staring at each other, Chu Chinga couldn't help but urge, "Han Yunxi, you're not going back on your word because you're afraid of losing, are you?" Han Yunxi strode to the second door and ignored Chu Chinga to look at Chu Tianyin. "The time limit is 1 hour. The one with the most serious injuries will lose, and the loser will leave." Chu Chinga was such a cold and lofty person that no one had ever ignored her. Anger filled her heart as a calculating look flashed past her eyes. "Han Yunxi, do you dare to raise the stakes?" They'd already agreed that the loser would leave. What else did she want? She'd already asked if she dared, so what else could Han Yunxi say? Her expression was calm. There's no harm in saying it. Seeing Han Yunxi's calm demeanor, Chu Chinga smiled coldly in her heart. This woman won't shed tears until she sees the coffin. It'll be too late for regrets once she's gone through the door. "Han Yunxi, if you lose, leave your medical pouch behind before you leave. Do you dare?" This was the stake that Chu Chinga had raised. Although she was angry, she hadn't lost her reason. Han Yunxi's poison skills were so mysterious that her medical pouch had to be hiding some secrets. Even if it wasn't, it had to have plenty of good stuff. A medical pouch was as important to a doctor as a sword was to a swordsman. Han Yunxi was too surprised. This was the first time someone had set their sights on her medical pouch. She'd found this pouch among Lady Tianxin's dowry, and everything inside belonged to her. Isn't Chu Chinga a little too picky? Seeing Han Yunxi hesitate, Chu Chinga knew she'd made the right choice. Cold, she gave her a disdainful look. "Han Yunxi, you don't dare?" But Han Yunxi was quick to agree. "No problem. Then what if you lose?" Before Chu Chinga could reply, she added, "How about you leave all your clothes behind?" Cough, cough. Everyone present, including Long Fei, was stunned by her words. Chu Tianyin started coughing violently. He wasn't faking it, but really was choking. What did it mean to go overboard? Han Yunxi was the one who'd done it. She'd embarrassed the other party before the outcome was even decided, leaving them with no way to retort. Chu Chinga's face alternated between red and white. It was as if she'd stripped naked in front of the crowd. She was both embarrassed and angry. In the end, she couldn't take it anymore and raged, "Han Yunxi, you're shameless." "So you don't dare?" Han Yunxi was truly shameless. She smiled as she retorted. Her question left Chuchinga at a loss for words. She couldn't answer, but she couldn't either. Han Yunxi straightened out the straps of her medical pouch and crossed her arms. She didn't speak, but enjoyed the sight of Chuchinga's expression. Han Yunxi's attitude made it impossible for the icy beauty to stay cold. She huffed and said, "That's it. Han Yunxi, just wait to lose. It's best if you leave half your life behind." Chuchinga was about to explode from anger, but Han Yunxi didn't lose her temper. I'll do my best." Chu Tianyin began to count down the time. Han Yunxi immediately went through the second door, while Chuchinga didn't want to be outdone. She stepped into the third. Although the secret underground palace was filled with night-luminescent pearls, the passageway behind the door was very, very deep. Moreover, they walked quickly, so it wasn't long before they lost sight of their figures. Long Fei Yi and Aunt Ru waited at the second door, while Duanmu Bei and Chu Tianyin waited at the third. Neither of them spoke, leaving the room very quiet. Han Yunxi, what did she discover? Aunt Ru couldn't help asking. If Long Fei Yi had let her go, then there had to be a reason. Long Fei Yi had no idea. He only glanced at Aunt Ru without replying. Still, his glance reassured Aunt Ru. As long as Long Fei Yi knows that woman's background, then there shouldn't be any problems. An hour of waiting was a long time. Long Fei Yi's attention was completely focused on the passageway, but Aunt Ru was looking at Duanmu Bei and Chu Tianyin with interest. She couldn't figure out how these two had found this place. After all, she'd searched for so many years without success. Could it be that Chuchinga had found them? Duanmu Bei had said just then that she knew poisons. But why did the children of Western Zhou's Chu clan study poisons? Did they come here for the secret of the perplexing butterfly illusion as well? But there's no way they'd know about its existence. Right now, Duanmu Bei's attention was focused on the passageway as well, while Chu Tianyin's mind was elsewhere. He couldn't figure out how Long Fei Yi and the rest had found this place. Had Han Yunxi brought them here? And who was that woman by Long Fei Yi's side? Why had they come here? While the people outside were filled with doubts, the two women inside were in completely different moods. Chuchinga was on full alert as soon as she entered the passageway. Her nerves were stretched taut as she walked step by step deeper into the passageway, constantly on guard for any signs of movement around her. She was truly advancing step by step. Not only did she want to win, but she wanted to win beautifully. Long Fei Yi, when we met 5 years ago in Wild Goose City, do you still remember me standing by Duanmu Yao's side? Everyone was cheering for my archery skills, but you were the only one who turned a blind eye. Today, I won't allow you to ignore me any longer. Chuchinga held her bow in one hand and an arrow in the other as she quickened her steps. She'd already walked a long way without encountering any danger, which made her feel hopeful. Perhaps her luck had arrived, and she'd chosen the right path. She was going to do her best. On the other side, Han Yunxi kept walking deeper into the passageway without encountering any danger. But she didn't keep walking until she was certain that the people at the door couldn't see her and stopped. She had to call for reinforcements. The first passageway had been filled with fire, so heaven knows what else was hidden here. She had to admit that she was slower than the others when it came to fleeing for her life. Thinking up to here, she couldn't help but think of a certain person, the white-robed gentleman, who knew when they'd meet again to clarify some things. She quickly recovered her wits and prepared to fish out Lil Thing from her medical pouch, but Lil Thing beat her to it. It scurried out on its own and landed on the ground. Han Yunxi was amused. "Lil Thing, are we starting to have some sort of telepathy? Are you coming out to help me?" The only reason she dared to come here was because of this treasure in her hands. Lil Thing was still a poison beast of the poison sect. With its protection, it was like having a protective talisman. But Han Yunxi couldn't bring it out when there were too many people around. After making sure no one was following her, Han Yunxi looked around to make sure it was safe. Then she took out the perplexing butterfly illusion. The bottle of poison had been pushed back and forth between her and Long Fei Yi until it ended up in her hands. Her bet with Chu Chinga was secondary. For now, she tossed it aside and focused on the perplexing butterfly illusion. Would Chu Chinga spit up blood if she found out? She definitely would. As soon as Lil Thing saw the perplexing butterfly illusion, it scurried into Han Yunxi's hands. Even if it couldn't eat it, a sniff was good enough. Han Yunxi's detox system was useless against the perplexing butterfly illusion. The acidic scent in the air was uniform, making it impossible for her to pick a direction. She could only use this chance to ask Lil Thing for help. If the perplexing butterfly illusion really had something to do with the poison sect, Lil Thing might know about it. Han Yunxi didn't know how to communicate with Lil Thing, so she had it sniff the perplexing butterfly illusion. Then she sniffed around herself in an exaggerated manner to indicate to Lil Thing the acidic scent in the air. Lil Thing cocked its head and stared for a while. It wasn't clear whether it understood Han Yunxi's intentions, but it stood up and imitated Han Yunxi's actions. It raised its chin and stuck out its nose as it sniffed around. Seeing this, Han Yunxi grew nervous. Was there a chance? Indeed, there was a chance. But Han Yunxi quickly discovered that this wasn't a show. Chapter 281. Seeing how serious Lil Thing was, Han Yunxi quickly squatted down and let Lil Thing sniff the perplexing butterfly illusion. Lil Thing was very cooperative. After sniffing the perplexing butterfly illusion for a while, it started sniffing around. Thus, master and servant sniffed around seriously. Suddenly, Lil Thing stopped, as if it had discovered something. It stood up and stared at Han Yunxi with wide eyes. Han Yunxi was overjoyed. What did you smell? Squeak, squeak. Lil Thing cried out excitedly. It jumped onto her and sat on her shoulder. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Han Yunxi quickly pulled it down and placed it in her palm, her face full of excitement. Did you find something? This secret passage has the scent of perplexing butterfly illusion. Is that right? Seeing how happy its master was, Lil Thing was even happier. It jumped a few times in Han Yunxi's palm. Really? Han Yunxi really wanted a definite answer. Lil Thing suddenly jumped down and ran into the depths of the secret passage. This is the path. Han Yunxi was overjoyed and quickly chased after it. Lil Thing even stopped and turned back to look at her, as if it was waiting for her. Seeing Lil Thing's behavior, Han Yunxi was 80% confident. She quickened her pace and followed it. Seeing that Han Yunxi continued to follow, Lil Thing ran even faster. But who knew that as they ran, Han Yunxi would suddenly hear a rustling sound coming from the front. It sounded like a large group of things were coming from afar, moving restlessly. What was going on? Han Yunxi stopped abruptly and became alert. At the same time, Lil Thing also stopped in front. In the blink of an eye, they saw a large group of palm-sized black spiders. They were densely packed, and like a flood, they covered the sky and covered the earth. Han Yunxi was stunned. For a moment, all the hair on her body stood on end. She wasn't afraid of spiders, but such a large group of black spiders was too scary and disgusting, wasn't it? She realized that her legs had turned to jelly. The detoxification system did not alert her, so these spiders should not be poisonous. Of course, she could not rule out the possibility that they were poisonous. There were too many things in the poison sect's forbidden grounds that were out of the ordinary. Han Yunxi's mind was in a mess. Not to mention whether they were poisonous or not, just the fact that there were so many of them was enough to scare someone to death, even if they weren't bitten to death. Han Yunxi didn't think much of it. She instinctively turned and ran the moment she saw the group of spiders. Lil Thing also ran, almost at the same time as Han Yunxi, but in the opposite direction. It ran towards the spiders. The insects and beasts here, regardless of whether they were poisonous or not, were all afraid of it. Basically, they wouldn't get close to it. It wasn't easy to use its master's human scent to attract these spiders, so of course, it couldn't miss it. Unfortunately, its master ran away too quickly. Just as the little thing ran over, The group of spiders immediately scattered. One by one, the huge black spiders fled in all directions as if they were running for their lives. In a short while, they were all gone. A little thing stared at the empty secret passage and plopped down on the ground.
It really wanted to cry.
I've been a vegetarian for so many days, but I haven't eaten meat yet. Han Yunxi ran and ran until she realized that Lil Thing wasn't following her. She stopped, realizing that there was no need for her to run at all. If Lil Thing couldn't even deal with a swarm of spiders, how could it survive in the poison sect? She quickly turned back, only to see that the swarm of black spiders had disappeared without a trace. It was as if they'd never appeared in the first place. Lil Thing was sitting in the middle of the secret passage, its head drooping in disappointment. Han Yunxi stared and stared. The more she looked, the more she felt that something wasn't right. There was no way the little beast hadn't noticed the swarm of spiders approaching, so it had been sniffing just now. All right, Han Yunxi instantly understood. She walked forward and pulled Lil Thing over, then stood in place and let it sniff the perplexing butterfly illusion. Lil Thing was listless because it hadn't eaten any meat, so it allowed Han Yunxi to grab it. Its little nose was stuck in the opening of the perplexing butterfly illusion bottle as it refused to budge. Han Yunxi couldn't help but burst into laughter at the sight. She glanced at the hourglass she carried with her and decided not to make things difficult for Lil Thing. She stuffed it back into her medical pouch and fed it some bone poison from her detox system. Time was almost up, so she had to leave. An hour was both a long and short time. If it wasn't for Lil Thing, Han Yunxi would have been surrounded by the spiders long ago. Even if she hadn't been surrounded, it would have taken her 2 to 4 hours to escape. Currently, Chu Qingge had just emerged from the secret passage. It was unclear what she'd encountered, but her white robes were stained with blood. Her left hand was hugging her right arm, indicating that she'd suffered serious injuries. Qingge, what's wrong? Chu Tianyin panicked as he rushed over to support her. But Chu Qingge only said, "It's just a minor injury, nothing to worry about." So speaking, she took a deep breath and forced herself to walk step by step out of the stone door and out of the secret passage. Her luck had been terrible to run into the White Tiger's sneak attack. Fortunately, she'd reacted quickly enough, or else her arm would have been gone by now. Her injuries were indeed serious, but she still pretended that nothing was wrong. As soon as she stepped out, she looked towards the stone door and asked coldly, "Han Yunxi hasn't come out yet?" If this girl was already injured to this extent, would Han Yunxi be in the same state? After a while, Chu Qingge couldn't wait any longer. She endured the pain and grinned. It can't be that Han Yunxi won't be able to come out, right? Hee, it's about time. As this crown prince sees it, things point to disaster. Duanmu Bei smiled coldly. Neither Long Fei nor Aunt Ru paid her any attention, but Long Fei's eyes flickered with worry. Yet right at this moment, a figure emerged from the depths of the secret passage. It grew clearer and clearer until it was none other than Han Yunxi. Long Fei was so close to rushing over, but he didn't. He only stood in place and watched. Chu Qingge and Duanmu Bei couldn't believe it and hurried over. But Long Fei took a step forward and blocked the passage with his tall frame. Duanmu Bei was about to speak when Chu Qingge stopped him. Full of confidence, she said in a low voice, "There's no rush. Wait and see." Han Yunxi had seen Long Fei from a distance. For some reason, his tall figure blocking the passage gave her an indescribable sense of loneliness. She walked in front of him, but he still didn't move aside. His tall frame gave off an oppressive feeling, but also a sense of security. He lowered his head to look at her, his dark eyes as deep as the sea. Han Yunxi wanted him to move aside, but when she saw his eyes, she couldn't bring herself to speak. Instead, she lowered her head. The two of them fell silent. Long Fei studied her silently, inspecting every inch of her body to make sure she wasn't injured. Finally, even Chu Qingge couldn't take it anymore. "Cold?" she asked Duke of Qin. "What do you mean by this?" Duanmu Bei laughed coldly at Chu Qingge's words. "Long Fei, what, are you afraid to admit your loss?" Long Fei didn't move, allowing them to speak as they pleased. He slowly examined her as if he wanted to inspect every inch of her body. Chu Qingge, who'd been left out to dry, couldn't take it anymore. She raged, "Long Fei Yi, are you going to publicly shield her like this?" It was Han Yunqi who said she wanted to fight one-on-one. Only then did Long Fei turn to look at her. Chu Qingge didn't expect this at all. His cold eyes gave her a start. This was the first time. Long Fei Yi had looked her in the eye for the first time. No matter how proud Chu Qingge was, her heart couldn't help but race. But Long Fei Yi only gave a cold snort before withdrawing his gaze and backing away from the door. Now Han Yunqi appeared before the crowd. Her clothes were clean and tidy, her hair in a neat bun. Her eyes were clear and bright, and her smile was light. She wasn't hurt at all. How could this be? Chu Qingge gaped. She couldn't believe it. Duanmu Bei and Chu Tianyin were equally shocked, but their shock differed from Chu Qingge's. The two of them exchanged glances, as if realizing something. Han Yunqi easily stepped over the threshold of the stone door. When she saw Chu Qingge's blood-stained clothes, she smiled. "It looks like Miss Chu's injuries aren't light."
I'm not.
Chu Qingge was still holding on. "Then did you lose?" Han Yunqi asked with a grin. Now, Chu Qingge couldn't even hold on. No matter how light her injuries were, she'd still lost to Han Yunqi, who wasn't hurt at all. How could this be? Big Brother had said before that the 5 doors were filled with dangers. No matter what, it couldn't be that she wasn't hurt at all. Chu Qingge couldn't figure it out, but Han Yunqi was standing right in front of her. She had no choice but to believe or act shamelessly. She couldn't help but steal a glance at Long Fei Yi, only to see that Long Fei Yi's gaze was fixed on Han Yunqi. He was so focused on her that his usual cold demeanor was nowhere to be seen. When she recalled Long Fei Yi's soft chuckle just then, Chu Qingge's heart broke into pieces. "If you lose, leave your clothes behind first, then," Han Yunqi said. At first she was still smiling, but when she turned to look at Duanmu Bei, her expression turned gloomy. In a cold voice, she said, "Then you can all scram." Unexpectedly, Duanmu Bei's figure flashed past, knocking aside Han Yunqi, who was blocking his way, and darting into the second door. There was only one explanation for Han Yunqi coming out unscathed, and that was that the second door had no dangers at all. Han Yunqi's luck was good, and she'd made the right choice. Chu Tianyin had said that only one of the 5 doors led to the treasury. Either it had no dangers at all, or it was extremely dangerous. It looked like they were looking for the second door. Seeing Duanmu Bei dash in, Chu Tianyin's eyes flickered with a complicated look. Without hesitation, he pulled Chu Qingge along with him, and the 2 siblings darted through the second door. If the second door was the one they were looking for, then he wouldn't miss it even if he had to break his promise and throw away his honor. That was because the thing he was looking for was too important. It was related to the clan's mission, and the so-called treasury was nothing more than a lie to trick Duanmu Bei. Long Fei Yi was holding on to Han Yunqi, who'd been knocked aside, so he didn't have time to stop them. After confirming that Han Yunqi was fine, he prepared to chase after them, but Han Yunqi hastily stopped him. "You can't go in, it's very dangerous inside." There was a dense swarm of black spiders inside. If it wasn't for Lil Thing keeping watch, anyone who went in would be hard-pressed to escape. Even if they didn't die, they'd be half dead. Why were Duanmu Bei and the rest fighting to get in first? Were they seeking death? Chapter 282. The second door was dangerous as well. Hearing Han Yunqi's dissuasion, Aunt Ru couldn't help but ask, "How is it dangerous? How did you come out unscathed?" Han Yunqi could hear Aunt Ru's doubts. She assumed that Long Fei Yi would ask the same question, but all he did was remain silent. He didn't add any more details. This guy isn't usually like this. He's always full of questions. Han Yunqi didn't have time to think, nor did she plan to explain herself to Aunt Ru. She laughed and joked, "Why should I tell you? You really don't know martial arts?" Aunt Ru asked again. Han Yunqi wasn't an idiot. She knew Aunt Ru didn't have any good intentions toward her. She could work together with Aunt Rue against a common enemy, but that didn't mean she'd bury the hatchet with her. A few hours ago, she'd almost lost her life to Aunt Rue's hidden weapons. She wasn't holding a grudge, but cherishing her own life. "Whether or not I know has nothing to do with you," Han Yunxi declared. But Aunt Rue suddenly grabbed Han Yunxi's wrist. At the same time, Long Fei pressed down on her hand and said coldly, "She doesn't know martial arts. Don't delay, let's find the way." Aunt Rue had already felt Han Yunxi's pulse and knew that she was well suited for martial arts. But before she could continue, Long Fei pulled her hand aside. "Enough." His gaze was sharp and his voice was filled with anger. Although he didn't express it, Aunt Rue could tell that he was both angry and sad. She never expected Fei to be so serious with her one day. No, she had to interrogate Tang Li properly. No matter how strong or useful Han Yunxi was, if she was truly a source of disaster, she had to be eliminated as soon as possible. Hiding her disappointment, Aunt Rue pretended that nothing had happened. "There's only 2 doors left. Which one should we take?" There was fire in the first, black spiders in the second, and heaven knows what Chuchinga had encountered in the third. But judging from her injuries, the third was no less dangerous than the first 2. Now, only the 4th and 5th paths remained. "No, it's still the 5 gates." Han Yunxi immediately denied. "The secret passage is very deep. An hour is not enough to finish it. Besides, no one can be sure that the dangerous path is not the right one." Han Yunxi's thoughts were still very meticulous. Putting aside the fact that Duanmu Bei and the others might be looking for the same thing as them, based on the current situation of these 5 doors, either 4 of them were dangerous, and the safe one was the correct one. So Duanmu Bei and the others chose the second door, or all 5 doors were dangerous, and one of them was the correct one. Long Fei understood what she meant. He said calmly, "Let's check out the situation of the 4th and 5th paths first." Han Yunxi agreed wholeheartedly. Aunt Rue was immersed in her own thoughts and did not say anything else. But just as they were about to enter the 4th door, Han Yunxi suddenly felt something tickling her from inside her sleeve. What else could it be but Lil Thing? This little fellow was always able to slip out of her medical pouch without anyone noticing. Even Han Yunxi couldn't sense it. Why was it tickling her now? She couldn't respond to it. If Long Fei and Aunt Rue found out, the consequences would be unimaginable. Heaven knows if stealing the poison beast was one of Long Fei's goals for this trip. Han Yunxi allowed Lil Thing to tickle her as she continued to walk forward with Long Fei. But the closer she got to the 4th door, the more Lil Thing scratched. In the end, it even gently bit her hand. Of course, it didn't actually bite down. Now Han Yunxi took it seriously. There was a problem. Lil Thing seemed to be stopping her from going forward. Could it be that the 4th door was dangerous? No. The dangers inside weren't dangerous to Lil Thing at all. What was Lil Thing trying to tell her? She tried to stop and Lil Thing immediately let go of her. Sure enough, Lil Thing was stopping her from going forward. Since the dangers inside the door weren't dangerous to Lil Thing, and it was stopping her, then there was only one possibility. Lil Thing wanted to lead her to the right path. Han Yunxi found that communicating with Lil Thing really required a lot of brain power. But they had only known each other for a few days. She believed that after a while, they would be able to understand each other. "Let's go to the 5th door first," she said seriously.
"Why?"
Long Fei didn't understand. If Aunt Rue wasn't here, he would have asked her long ago. Ever since Han Yunxi was kidnapped and rescued, he'd had plenty of questions. She'd left after their argument at the medical academy, so he hadn't had a chance to ask her. The biggest question was how she saved Long Tianma. "The corrosive smell here is the weakest," Han Yunxi replied without hesitation. They were here for the corrosive smell, so this answer was convincing. She only hoped that Lil Thing wouldn't trick her. "You can smell it?" Aunt Rue immediately asked. People who studied poison all had a good sense of smell. She could smell that there was no difference between the 5 doors. "If you don't believe me, you can go in and try." Han Yunxi's words blocked Aunt Rue's mouth. Aunt Rue was very unwilling, but she knew that her poison skills were not as good as Han Yunqi's. She could only endure and wait. Long Fei didn't have any suspicions and was about to walk towards the fifth door. Han Yunqi stopped him. Wait, let me take a good look and then we can decide. Rather than letting Long Fei and Aunt Rue test each door with her, it would be better for her to do it herself. It had to be said that Han Yunqi was very smart. This way, she wouldn't answer questions like, why? Long Fei nodded. Han Yunqi touched Lil Thing in her sleeve and walked towards the fifth door. This time, Lil Thing immediately scratched her again. She stopped and saw Long Fei and Aunt Rue looking at her. She didn't explain and changed to the third door. She didn't expect Lil Thing to still scratch her. She couldn't take the third door either. Now only the second door and the first door were left. Looking at the second door, Han Yunqi's mouth twitched. This little bastard couldn't be thinking about eating spiders, right? Long Fei and Aunt Rue looked at Han Yunqi walking back and forth at the door. They really thought that she was making a serious judgment. Han Yunqi crossed her arms and looked casual. In fact, she had secretly used 2 fingers to pinch Lil Thing's ears. This was a warning. If it dared to trick her again, it would have to bear the consequences. Just like that, Han Yunqi walked towards the second door while pinching Lil Thing's ears. Step by step, she walked slowly. Her attention was all on Lil Thing, waiting for its reaction. Who knew that when she was about to reach the second door, Lil Thing still didn't react. So, it was wishful thinking on her part. So, did it really want to go back and eat the black spiders? Han Yunqi wanted to drag Lil Thing out and throw it out. She couldn't help but sneak a glance at Long Fei. She saw that he was also looking at her. It wasn't easy to lie in front of this man. What should she do? Is it the second door? Didn't you go in just now? Didn't you smell it? Aunt Rue immediately questioned. Han Yunqi was in a difficult position. She didn't know how to answer. At this moment, Lil Thing suddenly scratched her again. Han Yunqi was stunned. She couldn't believe it. Lil Thing curled up in its master's sleeve, its mouth squirming nonstop. Actually, it had been conflicted for a long time. It had indeed smelled a scent similar to the perplexing butterfly illusion. However, it was really conflicted. 3 people had just gone in. The human scent was so strong that it would definitely attract more black spiders to suck their blood. It couldn't bear to miss it. However, in the end, it still decided to be a loyal guardian beast. Seeing that its master still didn't move, Lil Thing scratched her again. This time, Han Yunqi regained her senses. She walked towards the first door. Lil Thing didn't scratch her again. Instead, it rubbed its little head against her arm coquettishly. She didn't expect Lil Thing to want her to go through the first door. Seeing that Han Yunqi had been standing there for so long, Long Fei and Aunt Rue also came over.
Here.
Long Fei was a little uncertain. There's a fire in here. The 3 of them were burned out just now, Aunt Rue said seriously. Duanmu Bei and the others were burned out. Who knew where the fire came from or how it burned them? Not to mention Long Fei and Aunt Rue. Even Han Yunqi wasn't too sure. However, this was the path that Lil Thing pointed out, so she chose to believe it. This Lil Thing would play with her, but it wouldn't harm her. This is it. Let's go. Han Yunqi was very decisive. Long Fei didn't say anything and pulled her hand domineeringly again. Han Yunqi struggled again, but she still failed like before. Although she was decisive and straightforward in her actions, she hated ambiguous relationships and especially hated his lack of explanation. However, in the face of his domineering behavior, she would always unknowingly admit defeat, make an exception, and give in. She let him hold her hand and gradually intertwined their fingers. She lowered her eyes and told herself to ignore it. After entering the first passage, they walked for a very long time, but they didn't encounter anything. Han Yunqi adjusted her state of mind and seriously paid attention to the changes in the air. However, other than the purple miasma becoming fainter and fainter, there was nothing unusual about the rotting smell, and no poisonous gas appeared. The big fire that they were worried about also didn't appear. Even if they had to leave, they would have to leave for 2 days. Fortunately, they were prepared and had some dry rations on them. Otherwise, they would have to go hungry. On the second night, they saw the end of the secret passage. They saw that the surrounding walls were pitch black, and the luminous pearls were also damaged. It was obvious that it had been burned by a big fire. At the end of the passage, there was a wooden wall. The fire had burned a huge hole in it, and it could accommodate 2 people at a time. Long Fei examined it seriously and found that the wooden door was at least half a meter thick. With this thickness, it couldn't be cut open by people. The fire would probably burn for a few days. Han Yunxi also looked around and said seriously, "Looks like Duanmu Bei and the others made the wedding dress for us." From the looks of it, the fire was triggered by a mechanism. After it was triggered, it burned for a few days and burned through the wooden door. And this kind of mechanism was a one-time thing. Once it was triggered, there wouldn't be a second time. They were relatively safe. If Duanmu Bei and the others knew the truth, would they be angered to death? At this time, they might still be trapped in the second door. Thinking of this, Han Yunxi was happy. She smiled and said, "Let's go in and take a look." Seeing Han Yunxi's happy expression, Long Fei's usually cold lips subconsciously curled up. What would they find behind the wooden door? Chapter 283. As soon as they passed through the wooden door, they saw another secret passage. It wasn't made of stone, but more like a natural cave. It was pitch black inside without any luminous pearls to illuminate the way. Strangely enough, they didn't smell anything before entering the room, but as soon as they did, they caught a whiff of a strong acidic odor. Anyone could tell that it came from something extremely corrosive. This is the right path. Long Fei took out a luminous pearl from the secret passage to illuminate the way, making the difference between the scents even more obvious. Han Yunxi had long activated her detox system, but couldn't find any traces of poison in the air. Her nerves were taut as she raised her guard. She was afraid that the detox system wouldn't be able to detect the poison, and they'd be poisoned by it. Is this smell poisonous? Aunt Ru was worried as well. "You guys stay here, I'll go take a look." Long Fei was very straightforward, but Aunt Ru stopped him with a stern expression. "Yiper, your life is more important than anyone else's. You can't go." There was nothing wrong with her words. Long Fei's life was too valuable. Few people in Cloud Realm Continent could compare to him. But Han Yunxi found it strange no matter how she heard it. In the midst of her bewilderment, Aunt Ru added, "Han Yunxi, you go. Hurry." Her tone was practically an order. She made it sound like her life was worthless. Han Yunxi wanted to say that she'd go take a look first. With Lil Thing around, she'd at least have an extra layer of protection. But hearing Aunt Ru order her around made her feel uncomfortable. The perplexing butterfly illusion belongs to you guys. It has nothing to do with me. Why should I go? Han Yunxi replied offhandedly. Long Fei was about to speak, but fell silent at these words. His expression was cold, making it impossible to tell what he was thinking. Aunt Ru knitted her brows. So much for looking at Han Yunxi in a new light. In the end, this was the girl's attitude. Even if Long Fei doted on her, she shouldn't be so arrogant. It seemed that she did not need to interrogate Tang Li anymore. This woman could not be used, no matter how capable she was. Aunt Ru did not avoid the topic and said directly, You never keep useless people by your side. Those who can't be used by you, haha." Aunt Ru didn't continue speaking. Instead, she chuckled meaningfully. Obviously, he was talking about Han Yunxi. Hee. Was this a threat? Get rid of them just because they're useless? Silence? Han Yunxi did not refute. She also fell silent. She always knew that her greatest value to Long Fei was that she was useful. She couldn't understand why Long Fei still wanted to save Duanmu Yao after rejecting the marriage proposal. Perhaps Duanmu Yao was still useful to him. She glanced at Long Fei. Seeing that he had no intention of speaking, she became even more silent. The two of them did not speak. Aunt Rue did not say anything else and walked forward with large strides. Aunt Rue wasn't putting on an act. She was serious. As long as she could solve the secret of the perplexing butterfly illusion, she was willing to pay any price. The reason she let Han Yunqi go was because she considered that Han Yunqi's poison skills were better than hers. After Aunt Rue left, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi felt even more silent. Not long after, Long Fei Yi silently followed Aunt Rue. He didn't say a single word to Han Yunqi. Watching his back disappear into the distance, Han Yunqi unconsciously bit her lip. She didn't even realize that she had bitten her skin. In the end, she still chased after him. She thought, since I've already come this far, I might as well help him to the end. When Han Yunqi caught up, she discovered that the secret passage was actually a cave. At the end of the cave was a cliff. The cliff was very small, only able to accommodate 4 or 5 people standing on it. Unknown poisonous herbs grew on top of it. They were shaped like orchids, but they weren't blooming. The corrosive smell in the air was emitted by these herbs. If one stood in front of the cliff for too long, they wouldn't be able to stand it. Seeing Han Yunqi arrive, Aunt Rue only snorted softly. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything. These herbs are poisonous. They're extremely corrosive. They should be a new variety cultivated from the crossbreeding of several poisonous herbs. The poison is distributed in the roots, but the smell they emit isn't poisonous. Han Yunqi told Aunt Rue everything the detoxification system had analyzed. The detoxification system could analyze how many kinds of poison a herb contained, but it couldn't analyze the overall toxicity of the herb. This herb should be a new variety, at least to the detoxification system. Aunt Rue ignored her. Long Fei Yi nodded, put on his silver-threaded gloves, and picked the herbs himself. Aunt Rue lifted her clothes to store them. You can't. Han Yunqi stopped her. Your clothes will be corroded. Aunt Rue coughed softly, but didn't say anything. Han Yunqi immediately took out a glass box from her medical pouch and handed it to Long Fei Yi. These herbs are all the same. Just pick a few, and it'll be enough. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything, but he did as he was told. He picked 5 or 6 herbs, filled the glass box, and put them away personally. According to the clues Aunt Rue had found, the highly corrosive poisonous herbs needed for the perplexing butterfly illusion recipe were in the poison warehouse. It looked like this trip hadn't been in vain. Long Fei Yi swung his sword and chopped down a large boulder at the cave entrance, sealing off the path to the cliff. Han Yunqi stared blankly at the pile of rocks. Perplexing butterfly illusion seems to be the poison sex treasure. How did it end up in Long Fei Yi's hands? Long Fei Yi's mother was a member of the Tang clan, so what about his father? Why was he trying so hard to figure out the perplexing butterfly illusion? Did it have anything to do with the poison sect? It's good that you have some self-awareness. Let's go, Aunt Rue muttered to herself, but her words were clearly meant for Han Yunqi to hear. Han Yunqi really didn't know what Aunt Rue took her for. Was she Long Fei Yi's assistant? Or was she his Wang Fei and subordinate? Han Yunqi didn't want to refute her. She'd found the clues anyway, so she'd still return the perplexing butterfly illusion to him. But just as she was about to take out the perplexing butterfly illusion, Long Fei Yi quietly took her hand. He didn't say anything but walked back the way they came. Han Yunqi held the perplexing butterfly illusion in her other hand. She held onto it for a long time, but in the end, she silently placed it back in her medical pouch. Aunt Rue stood on one side, feeling as if she'd been left behind. Her brows were furrowed. Yi Er's actions were like a slap to her face. How could this be? They didn't speak the entire way back. As luck would have it, Long Fei Yi's group had just emerged from the first door when Duanmu Bei and the rest came out of the second. All 3 of them were in a sorry state, each of them paler than the other. It was obvious that they'd lost too much blood. Duanmu Bei and Chu Tianyin were both shirtless, their bodies covered in bites from the black spiders. Duanmu Bei, who'd been the first to break in, was covered in cuts and bruises. There were even 2 gashes on his face. Duanmu Bei's robes were nowhere to be seen. Most likely, they'd been bitten to shreds. Chu Tiannin's robes were wrapped around Chu Qingge's body, covered in a thick layer of spider silk. If one didn't know better, they'd think it was a layer of yarn. Heaven knows how miserable they'd been in the past 2 days and nights. The two groups emerged at the same time and saw each other, giving a start. In the silence, Han Yunxi saw Chu Qingge's panicked expression and burst into laughter. Haha, there were a lot of black spiders in there, right? Leaving aside Chu Qingge, even Duanmu Bei was angry and embarrassed. One of them took out a bow, while the other unsheathed his sword. Han Yunxi, you liar! Duanmu Bei was the angriest of them all. What did I lie to you about? Did I tell you there was something good inside? Han Yunxi couldn't help but laugh again.
Slut.
Give me your life. Chu Qingge was flustered and exasperated as she prepared to shoot. But Chu Tiannin quickly stopped her and muttered, "Let's go." Big bro. Chu Qingge was so angry that she'd lost all reason. She didn't realize that the three of them combined were no match for one Long Fei Yi. Their injuries were too severe, so they had to treat the spider poison quickly. Treat the poison. Chu Tiannin raged. Only then did Chu Qingge set down her bow. He glanced at Duanmu Bei before leading Chu Qingge away, without a word. Duanmu Bei brought up the rear. As he retreated, he warned, "Long Fei Yi, my Western Zhou Imperial clan isn't so easy to bully." Then he turned to flee. Long Fei Yi didn't say a word, but tightened his grip on Han Yunxi as he chased after them. There was only one path and one direction in the secret passage, but Long Fei Yi had almost caught up when Duanmu Bei's trio suddenly disappeared around a corner. Long Fei Yi chased after them and inspected the passage before discovering a switch in the corner that led to another path. No wonder the tree trunk outside was perfectly fine while they were here. "We can't stay here for long. Let's go back the way we came first," Aunt Ru said seriously. Heaven knows if the path Duanmu Bei and the rest took would be dangerous. Long Fei Yi listened to her and didn't chase after them. But he walked quickly with Han Yunxi in his arms. It wasn't long before Aunt Ru had trouble catching up. Han Yunxi could tell that he was doing it on purpose. Is he trying to shake off Aunt Ru? But Long Fei Yi used this time to start asking questions. Despite his silence, he was still as domineering as ever. As soon as he opened his mouth, he got straight to the point. "What did you use to save Long Tianma?" Han Yunxi didn't get used to it. She assumed that this fellow didn't know how to talk to her anymore. "I've been concocting an antidote this entire time. Fortunately, I succeeded that night." Han Yunxi had long thought of an answer. When Gu asked, she'd give him the same answer. Heaven knows if these two fellows would try to take advantage of Lil Thing. Lil Thing hadn't fully recovered yet, so it was still too weak to protect itself. If they wanted to take it by force, she really wouldn't be able to fight them. Actually, if Lil Thing hadn't jumped onto Gu Beiyue's body that day, she wouldn't have told Gu Beiyue about Lil Thing's existence. She didn't want anyone to know about this. If this were to spread, not to mention how the medical school would deal with her, the people fighting for the poisonous beast in the world wouldn't let her off. Such a coincidence. Long Fei Yi was obviously suspicious. However, as long as Han Yunxi didn't change her story, he didn't believe that he wouldn't be able to find any loopholes. "How did that white-robed man save you?" Long Fei Yi asked again. "A chance encounter," Han Yunxi said lightly. "Why did he save you?" Long Fei Yi asked again. Han Yunxi had a helpless look on her face. "I want to know too." Her words were the truth. Seeing Long Fei Yi's complicated gaze, she smiled and asked openly, "Long Fei Yi, do you also suspect that I'm the orphan of Western Qin, the person that the Shadow Clan wants to protect?" Chapter 284. Of course Long Fei Yi had his suspicions. When he saw Han Yunxi's magnanimous eyes and heard her question, he didn't feel relieved. Instead, the complicated look in his eyes deepened. This was the first time Han Yunxi had seen this fellow so preoccupied. Han Yunxi didn't have any ambitions to revive the imperial clan. Moreover, Long Fei Yi wasn't Tianning's emperor. If she really was, she wouldn't be a threat to him at all. Perhaps she could even be of help to him. She thought that Long Fei-yi would be very interested, but Long Fei-yi only said mildly, "Perhaps he's here for the poison beast." "As I see it, it doesn't seem like it," Han Yunxi said seriously. But Long Fei-yi didn't seem to want to continue this topic. He avoided it and asked, "What are you doing here?" She'd brought Lil Thing here to eat, and for the sake of the perplexing butterfly illusion. "To find a few medicinal plants," Han Yunxi replied mildly. "Did you find them?" Long Fei-yi asked again. Han Yunxi nodded. It was as if their previous quarrel had never happened. The two of them spoke naturally and unknowingly fell into silence. After a long time, Han Yunxi spoke up first. "That Aunt Ru is..." Unexpectedly, Long Fei-yi didn't hide anything and replied directly, "My mother's younger sister." So she really was his biological aunt. No wonder she dared to lecture Long Fei-yi. "She's also from the Tang clan?" Han Yunxi asked again. "Second master. Tang Li's father is the clan head," Long Fei-yi replied mildly. "Your father is also from the Tang clans?" Han Yunxi asked again. This time, a trace of hesitation flashed past Long Fei-yi's eyes. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi didn't see it. Long Fei-yi nodded. Yes. Han Yunxi actually believed her just like that. She thought that this was right. The Tang family's women didn't marry outside the family. Was this fellow in a good mood today, or was there something wrong? He actually answered every question. Between them, it was really rare for them to chat so calmly. Han Yunxi seized this opportunity and threw out a few more questions. Although Long Fei-yi was a man of few words, he still answered her questions one by one. "The perplexing butterfly illusion belongs to the poison sect." Yes. Perplexing butterfly illusion is related to the Tang sect's poison techniques, right? Yes. Could the decline of the Tang sect's poison arts be related to the destruction of the Medical Academy's poison sect? A little. You want to obtain the poison sect's power? Revive the Tang sect's poison techniques? Yeah. Han Yunxi asked a question that had nothing to do with the previous one. She lifted her head to look at him, her eyes as clear as ever. "Long Fei-yi, why did you save Duan Muyao?" Long Fei-yi didn't expect this at all. Looking at her, he unconsciously stopped in his tracks. Han Yunxi stared into his eyes as if she wanted to see right through him. Long Fei-yi also looked at her, his lips pursed, as if he was hesitating. Han Yunxi didn't press him for an answer. She waited. She'd already answered all the questions she hadn't answered because of their fight. Shouldn't he give her an explanation about Duan Muyao? Even if he didn't, he should at least answer her questions. Their eyes met, but Long Fei-yi remained silent even after Aunt Ru caught up to them. No explanation, not even a perfunctory answer. When Aunt Ru saw them like this, she urged, "Why aren't you leaving?" In the end, Long Fei-yi didn't give her an answer. He avoided Han Yunxi's gaze and continued forward. Han Yunxi didn't ask any more questions. She looked at his intertwined fingers and didn't try to break free. Instead, a cold smile rose to her lips. "Long Fei-yi, you said I provoked you. But between the two of us, who's the one who provoked who more?" After leaving the secret passage, they found that it was a sunny day outside. The forest was very quiet in the afternoon, and they were lucky to have avoided the night insects. Han Yunxi didn't look for Gu Beiwei and the others. Lil Thing had saved Gu, so the two of them should be safe now. Perhaps they'd already left this place. She didn't bat an eyelid as she allowed Long Fei-yi to bring her back to the inn. It was the same inn as before, the Sky Room number 1. Aunt Ru followed them inside and looked around. It wasn't clear what she was interrogating, but after looking around, she said, "Yiber, come with me for a bit." Han Yunxi could tell that she was avoiding her. She took the initiative to say, "I'm going back to the medical academy." "No need. Come back to Tianing with this prince first thing in the morning tomorrow," Long Fei-yi said domineeringly. "I still have things to do." Han Yunxi's tone was especially calm. She'd never spoken so calmly to this fellow before. "What is it?" Long Fei-yi asked. "Pack my luggage." "My things are still there," Han Yunxi replied. She had a lot of things to do. "I'll have the servants clean it up later. You should rest first." Long Fei Yi hesitated, then added, I'll be right next door. Han Yunxi didn't care where he was. Her expression was serious. I like to pack my things myself. There's also a lot of medicinal ingredients that the servants won't understand. Long Fei Yi was about to go with her when Tang Li's pained cries came from next door. Long Fei Yi couldn't help but frown as he looked towards Aunt Ru. I'll wait for you next door. Aunt Ru smiled. Without a word, she turned and left. Someone come, escort the Princess Consort to the medical academy. Go and come back quickly. Long Fei Yi couldn't be bothered with Han Yunxi right now as he hurriedly chased after Aunt Ru. Very soon, Tang Li's cries rose again as if he'd been badly abused. Han Yunxi was bewildered. It looked like Aunt Ru had done something to Tang Li. Of course, she didn't have the spare energy to pay attention to these matters. She looked meaningfully at the Imperial Guard. You want to go to the medical academy with me? This guard was the one who'd been scolded by Han Yunxi before. He trembled with fear as he nodded. This subordinate will escort Nyang Nyang there. Then I'll have to trouble you. Han Yunxi was very polite. The guard only felt a chill run down his back. He didn't know how to reply when Han Yunxi's hand reached out towards his face. It looked like she was going to tease him by the chin. The guard was frightened and backed away. Esteemed Wang Fei, don't what? Han Yunxi faintly smiled and snapped her fingers. The guard's eyes rolled back as he leaned against the wall behind him and slowly fell to the ground. Drugging an unsuspecting person was as easy as flipping her hand for Han Yunxi. She took out the perplexing butterfly illusion and placed it on the table. Amidst the continuous cries coming from next door, she strode out in the next room. Tang Li had been tied to the bed for 4 whole days. He was so hungry that his chest was sticking to his back, but that wasn't important. What was important was that he really wanted to go to the outhouse. He'd already reached his limit. Aunt Ru, I've said everything I needed to say. Just let me go. Long Fei Yi is right here. If there's anything you need, just ask him directly. Why are you tormenting me? Aunt Ru, if you don't let me go, I'll definitely complain to my mother when I get back. I can't take it anymore. Aunt Ru allowed Tang Li to clamor and scream as she sat by the bed calmly. She smiled and said, You said that girls' poison skills are only SSO. Tang Li glanced at Long Fei Yi from the corner of his eye. He didn't dare to answer for a long time. He originally wanted to go to the poisonous herb storage with Long Fei Yi, but who knew that Long Fei Yi would go crazy and leave early, leaving him to oversleep in the inn and get caught red-handed by Aunt Ru. The moment Aunt Ru arrived, she tied him up and interrogated him about Han Yunxi. He had basically reduced Han Yunxi to a source of trouble. You said that she's spoiled and unreasonable and likes to throw tantrums? Aunt Ru asked again. The corner of Tang Li's mouth twitched. He even forgot to go to the outhouse and didn't say anything. You said that she's a source of trouble and that Yi is head over heels for her? Yi gave her the perplexing butterfly illusion? Aunt Ru asked again. Tang Li really wanted to see Long Fei Yi's expression right now. Unfortunately, he didn't dare. You also said that she's a fickle woman who is hooked up with many men? Aunt Ru laughed, but Tang Li almost cried. This was because Long Fei Yi had already walked in front of him. That handsome face of his was covered in dark clouds. It was so dark that it was frightening. He slowly leaned forward. His cold face that angered both men and gods was almost touching Tang Li's face. He asked word by word, What else did you say? Tang Li's back was drenched in cold sweat. His lips were tightly pursed, and he didn't dare to speak. Long Fei Yi got closer and closer. He tilted his head and whispered into Tang Li's ear about the Shadow Clan before he could finish. Tang Li immediately denied it. No. It was because of the Shadow Clan that he had slandered Han Yunxi in front of Aunt Ru. If Han Yunxi was really the person that the Shadow Clan wanted to protect, then it was destined that Han Yunxi would be irreconcilable with them forever. Long Fei Yi would have to abandon this woman. That day at the medical school, he had personally witnessed Long Fei Yi's abnormality. He had almost taken Han Yunxi. However, When faced with that white robe, he had finally calmed down. Faced with Han Yunxi's questioning, he hadn't explained anything about Duan Muyao. Tang Li knew that Long Fei Yi was still hesitant about Han Yunxi. They had grown up together. He knew very well that Long Fei Yi was the kind of person who wouldn't easily pick up something. However, once he picked it up, he definitely wouldn't let it go. If he was determined to take it, he definitely wouldn't abandon it. He had to stop everything from happening while Long Fei Yi was still hesitating. And Aunt Ru had come at the right time. Of course, he didn't reveal the Shadow Clan. Otherwise, with Aunt Ru's personality, who would rather kill the wrong person than miss out, Han Yunxi would undoubtedly die. Seeing Long Fei Yi and Tang Li whispering in each other's ears, Aunt Ru wasn't happy. She smiled and said, "What are you two brothers whispering about that you can't let me know?" Long Fei Yi didn't answer. Of course, Tang Li didn't dare to answer either. Could it be that Han Yunxi has some secret that you can't let me know? Aunt Ru pretended to be joking as she asked. At this time, Long Fei Yi finally stood up. He didn't answer Aunt Ru and personally untied Tang Li. Aunt Ru stretched out a hand and fiercely pressed down on Tang Li's body. She coldly said, "What's the rush? He's going to die from holding it in. Are you going to pay for my aunt, son?" Long Fei Yi asked indifferently. Tang Li's mother, who was also the wife of the Tang sect master, was famous for doting on her son. Otherwise, why would Tang Li run away from home for so long? If it were in the past, Aunt Ru would have given in. As his elder sister, she was still rather wary of her sister-in-law. But this time, she didn't. She had seen how well Yi treated Han Yunxi in the past 3 or 4 days. This wasn't a small matter. She admitted that Han Yunxi had the right to stay by Yi side, but her background had to be investigated thoroughly. Tang Li, where did Han Yunxi learn her poison techniques? Aunt Ru was asking Tang Li, but her cold gaze was fixed on Long Fei Yi. Note to the readers, I can only update once today. The second update will be updated around 6 p.m. tomorrow. Love you. Chapter 285. Where did Han Yunxi learn her poison skills? Aunt Ru had already asked Long Fei Yi this question once. It was obvious that Long Fei Yi's expert excuse wasn't enough to fool Aunt Ru. Tang Li looked at Aunt Ru, then at Long Fei Yi, feeling helpless. Forget about him. Even Long Fei Yi didn't know. Ever since Han Yunxi saved Mu Qinggu, they'd been investigating. All they knew now was that Madame Tianxin came from Medicine City, but they didn't know anything else. This wasn't a poison warehouse, so they didn't need to rely on Han Yunxi. Aunt Ru didn't have that kind of patience. She turned to Tang Li with a stern expression. Still not going to talk? Tang Li jumped in fright and hastily replied, "An expert taught her, but the expert won't let me say." This answer was exactly the same as Long Fei Yi's. They hadn't discussed it beforehand, but this was a tacit understanding between the two brothers. Aside from the 100 Poisons sect and our Tang sect, who else has the ability to teach hers? Aunt Ru asked with interest. The 100 Poisons sect and the Tang sect's poison skills were both branches of the Poison sect. After the Poison sect was destroyed, the Tang sect's poison skills declined. Now, only the 100 Poisons sect still existed, and they hadn't made any big moves in the past few years. The 100 Poisons sect and the Tang sect's poison skills are both large branches of the Poison sect. There must be smaller branches of the Poison sect that we don't know about, Tang Li hurriedly replied, so fast that Long Fei Yi couldn't stop him even if he wanted to. He shut his mouth halfway through his sentence. He said the wrong thing. Aunt Ru sucked in a cold breath. So you don't know who the expert is either? Tang Li didn't dare answer. He wanted nothing more than to slap himself to death. He must have gone crazy from holding in his bladder. Aunt Ru suddenly slammed the table with a loud bang. You gave the perplexing butterfly illusion to a woman of unknown origin. What's the meaning of this? If your mother knew that you were so easily bewitched by a woman, she wouldn't be able to rest in peace even in death. Long Fei Yi silently untied Tang Li's rope, but there was no response. When Tang Li saw how silent he was, he felt suffocated. He wanted to say something but stopped himself. Have you ever thought about why your mother died? How could you? Aunt Ru still wanted to say something, but who knew that Long Fei Yi would suddenly turn his head to look at her? His gaze was so cold that Aunt Ru couldn't help but shiver in fright. Aunt Ru opened her mouth but didn't say anything. After Long Fei Yi untied Tang Li, he turned around and left without saying a word. Tang Li ignored Aunt Ru and hurriedly chased after her. However, Long Fei Yi did not leave. Instead, he sat on the roof of the room next door. After sitting for a while, he put his arms behind his head and lay down. If it weren't for the fact that he was full of worries, he would have noticed the abnormality in the room long ago. Unfortunately, he didn't. Tang Li landed beside him. Like him, he lay down and stared at the starry sky, not daring to say anything. He had framed Han Yunxi so that Aunt Ru could interfere with Long Fei Yi. While Long Fei Yi was still hesitating, Aunt Ru could make a decision for him. Even if Han Yunxi was a good helper, Long Fei Yi definitely could not keep her by his side, much less be tempted by her. After a long time, seeing that Long Fei Yi had no intention of settling the score with him, Tang Li finally said, "Big brother, let's take back the perplexing butterfly illusion." Long Fei Yi did not answer. "Big brother, you're not explaining Duan Muyao's matter because you're taking the opportunity to reject that woman. Since you've already rejected her, why don't you let go?" As a bystander, Tang Li saw all of Long Fei Yi's conflicts during this period of time. He had clearly rejected a woman, yet he stubbornly kept her by his side and silently treated her well. How was this his style? Seeing that Long Fei Yi was still not saying anything, Tang Li said coldly, "Big brother, if she really is a descendant of Western Qin's imperial family, the Tang sect will definitely kill her." "You wouldn't dare." Long Fei Yi finally spoke. Since he had already said this, Tang Li threw caution to the wind. "If she really is, you should kill her even more than the Tang sect. Don't forget how your mother died." This was the second time he had heard this today. How did his mother die? Long Fei Yi narrowed his eyes cold as he looked at Tang Li. His entire being exuded a terrifying murderous aura. Tang Li was not afraid and looked back at him confidently. Tang Li also admired Han Yunxi. He also hoped that Han Yunxi had nothing to do with the Shadow Clan. He also hoped that Han Yunxi could walk into Long Fei Yi's heart. Unfortunately, the appearance of the Shadow Clan made all of this impossible. She's most likely Western Qin's orphan. Tang Li was very certain. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi suddenly grabbed him by the neck and warned him word by word, "It doesn't matter if she is or not. She's still this prince's princess consort. She must stay by this prince's side. Go tell Aunt Ru to stop having any ideas about her. Otherwise, I won't be polite." Wasn't it just a woman? Did this guy have to be so stubborn? Tang Li flung his hand away and said coldly, "Long Fei Yi, can you get past the hurdle in your heart?" If he could get past the hurdle in his heart, why did he keep hiding Duan Muyao's matter and let Han Yunxi be disappointed again and again? Long Fei Yi was slightly taken aback. He did not reply and turned around to head towards the medical academy. Tang Li chased after him and shouted, "Long Fei Yi, Han Yunxi is not the kind of woman who can be forced to stay." Long Fei Yi naturally heard him, but he did not turn around. He thought that Han Yunxi should still be packing her things at this time. Unfortunately, he was wrong. Han Yunxi actually did not have much to pack. As soon as she returned to the medical academy, she went to look for Gu Beiwei and the others. As she expected, Gu and Gu Beiwei could not find her and went back first. Although Gu could be very petty at times, he was still very gentlemanly this time and did not leave Gu Beiwei alone in the poisonous grass storage. At this time, the three of them were in Luo Zuishan's courtyard. "Who saved you?" Han Yunxi asked tentatively. She was not sure if Gu had seen Lil Thing, or if he had recognized it as the poisonous beast. Gu shrugged. "I don't know what happened, but those man-eating vines suddenly wilted. There were plenty of poisonous insects in the poison grounds to begin with, so every creature had its vanquisher. Perhaps something had subdued the man-eating vines, but Gu Qixiao didn't take it to heart. He teased, Poison lass, you're so heartless as to leave with Long Fei without caring whether I live or die. It seemed that Lil Thing did not expose itself.
Good job.
Your life or death has nothing to do with me. Han Yunxi replied with a smile and secretly touched the medical pouch. Lil Thing enjoyed its master's caress through the cloth and looked intoxicated. It remembered that when it came back to look for its master that day, it saw the beautiful man in red trapped by the man-eating vines. It admitted that it hesitated at that time. Should it wait for the man-eating vines to eat the beautiful man in red before it ate the man-eating vines? After all, eating the man-eating vines like this would be more nutritious. However, just as it was hesitating and thinking about how strong the relationship between its master and the beautiful man in red was, the man in white used a small throwing knife to silently cut off the roots of all the man-eating vines. Lil Thing hid first and waited for the two people to leave before it went to eat the vines. It did not know why its master was suddenly caressing it so gently. In any case, it was fine as long as its master liked it. Han Yunxi's answer made Luo Zuishan's face darken, but Gu was not angry. He squinted and smiled. Then how can I have a relationship with you? Well, a shameless person is invincible. Han Yunxi expressed defeat and was too lazy to pay attention to him. After confirming that Gu and Gu Beiwa had returned safely, Han Yunxi was relieved. Imperial Physician Gu, you can go back with His Highness the Crown Prince and Qin Wangrong. I still have matters to attend to, so I won't be going with you. Gu Beiwa nodded to show that he understood.
He didn't even ask why.
No matter how close he was to Han Yunxi, he still maintained the status of superior and subordinate without overstepping his boundaries. You're going with Long Fei Yi's? Gu immediately asked. Han Yunxi did not answer directly, only saying indifferently, I still have something to do. She got up to leave after she finished speaking. A trace of suspicion flashed through Gu Beiyue's eyes, but he did not say anything. Gu chased after her. What else do you have to do? Private matters. Han Yunxi's meaning was very obvious, but Gu just had to ask, what private matters? If not for the fact that she wanted to see Gu Beiyue, Han Yunxi would have really regretted coming here. She would have gone directly to Third Elder. Once she was targeted by this guy, he would pester her to death. Looking at Gu, Han Yunxi's brows were tightly knitted. Seeing her expression, Gu did not give in. Instead, he laughed. Poison girl, you still haven't told me how you cured Long Tiama's poison. Han Yunxi was still using the same excuse to deal with Long Fei Yi to deal with Gu. Gu was very suspicious. What a coincidence. Han Yunxi did not say much. Excuse me. However, Gu just wouldn't leave. He followed her all the way to Third Elder's place. Han Yunxi finally stopped. What do you want? Tell me who taught you your poison skills. Gu Qixiao had come for this in the end. How annoying. Han Yunxi was already in a bad mood. When she heard this, she almost hit him. At this moment, Third Elder walked over alone from a side path. Han Yunxi had only just turned around when Gu suddenly disappeared. He dodged very quickly. This guy was clearly familiar with the medical academy, but he was so secretive. It was as if he was afraid of being seen. What was going on? All right, Han Yunxi didn't have the energy to care so much. She had plenty of things to do. Madame Tianxin, the Shadow Clan, and the Poison Sect. These three names seemed unlikely to coexist, but they seemed to coexist on her body. Han Yunxi gathered her thoughts and walked towards Third Elder. Third Elder had just returned from the Council of Elders. The poison beast had been stolen. The Gu arts had reappeared, and Shi Yuba had escaped. These three matters had thrown the medical academy's higher-ups into a frenzy. He'd finally managed to sneak back and rest. As soon as he saw Han Yunxi, Third Elder was puzzled. Esteemed Wang Fei hasn't left yet. His Highness Duke of Qin came looking for her just now. He just left. Should I send someone to chase after him? Long Fei hadn't been able to find Han Yunxi. When he saw her, he thought that she'd packed up and left, so he returned to the inn. Han Yunxi avoided the question and said indifferently, Third Elder, there's something I want to ask you in private. Note to the reader. Let me catch up on yesterday's update. Chapter 286. Han Yunxi followed Third Elder into the rooms. She couldn't help but wonder what Long Feiyi was doing right now. Had he seen the perplexing butterfly illusion she'd left on the table? Would he be angry if he knew she'd left without saying goodbye? In her absent-mindedness, she didn't notice Gu Qishao hiding on one side, narrowing his eyes as he stared at her with interest. Hearing that it was a private matter, Third Elder dismissed everyone as soon as they arrived at the guest hall. He invited Han Yunxi to sit down. "Esteemed Wang Fei, please have a seat of honor." Third Elder personally brewed tea without any of the airs of an elder. This wasn't only because Han Yunxi's acupuncture skills had won him over, but also because Han Yunxi's magnanimity for winning but not winning. Han Yunxi wasn't used to such a gentle Third Elder. If they weren't enemies, she would still be very polite. She quickly took the teacup from Third Elder's hands and said, "It's better for this junior to do it. Third Elder can just call me Yunxi." This. Third Elder hesitated. "We're not in Tianing, so there's no need for such formalities. Moreover, I'm a junior." Han Yunxi smiled. Third Elder nodded in delight. Han Yunxi sighed with emotion in her heart. Although Third Elder couldn't represent the medical academy, he wasn't an ordinary person. He was the first person she'd made friends with in Cloud Realm Continent. "Esteemed Wang Fei, if you have any questions, feel free to ask." "This old man's lips are sealed," Third Elder said seriously. Naturally, private matters had to be kept secret. With his words, Han Yunxi no longer held back. "I want to know how my father, Han Kongan, became a director in the past." Third Elder never expected Han Yunxi to ask such a question. He stroked his beard and asked, "What do you want to know?" Since she'd chosen to ask, Han Yunxi didn't hide anything. "With my father's strength, I'm afraid it'd be difficult for him to become a director," she said. Third Elder immediately understood what he was trying to say. Directors had to be nominated by the Council of Elders and approved by a vote. However, if they weren't medical saints like Luo Zuishan and Shi Yuba, they would rarely be remembered by the Council of Elders. Han Kongan was disqualified from being a director last year. Third Elder still remembered this name. He muttered to himself, Han Kongan. Han Kongan. Han Yunxi waited and couldn't help but ask, "Has Elder heard of my mother, Lady Tianqin?" Lady Tianqin had a great reputation in Tianning's capital city, but her name was unknown in the medical academy, or even in Cloud Realm Continent. "Madam Tianqin?" Third Elder thought for a while, and shook his head. "I have never heard of her." Perhaps he'd heard of her before, but had forgotten. After all, Lady Tianqin's name had spread throughout Tianning's capital over a decade ago. Han Yunxi remembered that when she first arrived at the medical school, Madame Lianxin had mentioned Han Kongan and Madame Tianqin, but she had only said that she had heard of them. At that time, she had thought that Madame Lianxin was purposely trying to intimidate her. Now, looking at Third Elder's reaction, it seemed that Madame Lianxin was speaking the truth. However, Third Elder didn't even know Madame Tianqin. How did Madame Tianqin help Han Kongan get the director position? Could it have something to do with the other elders? Han Yunxi was bewildered. "She was the one who helped my father get the director position." Third Elder's eyes flickered with hesitation as he tried his best to recall. There were far too many unfair elections like this, and Han Kongan wasn't the only one. He could only be certain that Han Kongan hadn't been the one to let him in. Soon enough, Third Elder understood and said meaningfully, "When Han Kongan was elected director, the Council of Elders didn't nominate him. What's going on?" Han Yunxi asked anxiously. 2 elders from the Council of Elders passed away that year, so the director election was personally presided over by the 2 vice directors, Third Elder said seriously. Above the Council of Elders in the Medical Academy were the vice directors and directors. There were 4 vice directors in total. Han Yunxi's heart grew cold at these words. It was obvious that Han Kongan's election as director was the result of someone going easy on him. Forget about asking the 4 vice directors herself. Even if she had Third Elder help her find out what happened that year, there'd be no results. Everyone had a tacit understanding of the existence of someone going easy on him, but they'd never expose it. If Third Elder went to ask the higher-ups, he'd definitely offend someone. Han Yunxi could only be certain that Madame Tianqin wasn't involved with the Council of Elders. Perhaps she was related to the 4 vice-directors. Han Yunxi was still rejoicing over the fact that she'd made friends with an elder, but she never expected her mother to be so much more formidable than her. A vice-director was above everyone else in the medical academy, second only to one person. Seeing Han Yunxi's disappointed expression, third elder hesitated before murmuring in a low voice, "Yunxi, it's not something that can be solved with silver alone." In other words, the vice-director didn't lack silver. Even if he did, he wouldn't easily do things for others. Thus, Madame Tianqin must have an excellent relationship with the person who helped her. Han Yunxi nodded. She understood the importance of this relationship. How about this? The higher-ups are all busy right now. After a while, this old man will introduce you to them. Third elder was still very enthusiastic. Third elder couldn't ask, but Han Yunxi could probe. Someone who was close to her mother would at least give her some face. Han Yunxi rejoiced. "Many thanks, elder." Third elder waved a hand. "You're too courteous." Although she hadn't gotten much out of this trip, at least she hadn't come in vain. Han Yunxi had some clues. Otherwise, Madame Tianqin didn't even have a single friend in Tianning, and her identity was fake. She really didn't know where to start looking for her. After bidding farewell to third elder, Han Yunxi picked up her bundle and left. She walked through the side doors of the medical academy, instructing third elder not to reveal her whereabouts. After walking out the doors, she realized that she had to seriously consider a question. Where should she go from here? But she hadn't even decided where to stay for the night when she heard Gu's teasing laughter from the side. "Poison lass, where are you going by yourself?" Han Yunxi turned to look and saw Gu Qishao leaning lazily against the wall, with one hand propping up his head. His dimples were like a flower as he smiled at her. His red robes were flirtatious and beautiful, but in Han Yunxi's eyes, he was nothing but a scoundrel. Han Yunxi couldn't be bothered with him and walked in the opposite direction. "Poison lass, you sent your biological father to prison, then asked about your biological mother. Isn't this a little too interesting?" Gu asked with a smile. Without a doubt, he'd overheard the entire conversation between Han Yunxi and third elder. It had to be said that he was very surprised. He never thought that Han Yunxi herself didn't know about Madame Tianqin's origins. Han Yunxi stopped in her tracks and said coldly, "You were eavesdropping." Gu was so honest that it made people want to hit him. Han Yunxi only smiled coldly. She didn't argue with him and turned to leave.
Gu was very surprised.
He'd purposely replied in such an annoying manner so that she'd rush over. What did this woman mean by smiling coldly? Seeing that Han Yunxi didn't even look back, Gu hurriedly chased after her. "Poison lass, are you in a bad mood?" Han Yunxi didn't answer. Gu asked again, "Did Long Fei bully you? Why did he go to the poisonous herb storage?" Han Yunxi didn't even look at him. Gu suddenly reached out to stop her. With a serious expression, he said angrily, "How did Long Fei bully you? You're the one who bullied me. Don't you know what privacy is?" Han Yunxi asked angrily. "It's my fault," Gu admitted openly. As long as she paid attention to him, he would be happy even if she scolded him to his face. He was such a person. Once he took a liking to someone, he would like them without any bottom line and spoil them to the heavens. In any case, Han Yunxi had already scolded him countless times. She was just short of hitting him. If Han Yunxi were to slap him one day, who knew if he would be angry? Gu just smiled and admitted his mistake. Han Yunxi actually didn't know what to do with him. Ignoring this guy was the best way to deal with him. She took a deep breath. Just as she was about to leave, Gu smiled and said, "Poison lass, have you heard of Mu Xen?" Han Yunxi shook her head. She didn't know why he suddenly asked this. Gu put an arm around her shoulder and smiled. "Let's go. I'll take you to Medicine City to meet her." Han Yunxi immediately pushed him away. "I'm not interested." However, Gu hugged her again. Han Yunxi was about to push him away when he whispered in her ear, "Mu Xen is Madame Tianqin. She's also your mother's maiden name." She's from Medicine City's Mu family. Han Yunxi was stunned when she heard this. She looked at him in disbelief. Gu really liked how Han Yunxi looked when she only had eyes for him. He was just joking, but now he couldn't help but hug her even tighter. Poison lass, come with me. Han Yunxi suddenly pushed him away. She used so much force that he almost fell to the ground. You hooligan. Don't blame me for being rude if you touch me again. Do you think I'll believe you just because you made up a random name? Do you think I'm a fool? This guy had even suspected that Han Kongan was from the Tang clan when he saw her hidden weapons. How could he have found out Madame Tianxin's true identity so quickly? Gu wasn't anxious. He smiled and said, "Why don't you go back and ask Third Elder if Madame Lianxin has an affair with Vice Academy head Lin? You can also ask him if Madame Lianxin has an older sister who's been missing for a long time." Han Yunxi became serious when she heard this. She remembered Gu Beiwa saying that Fourth Elder Madame Lianxin was from Medicine City's Mu family. She wasn't young anymore, but she was still only a fourth-ranked divine doctor. Despite that, she was able to occupy a seat in the Elders' Council. This wasn't just because she had the backing of Medicine City's Mu family. She also had the support of the Medical Academy's upper echelons. If Madame Lianxin and Vice Academy head Lin had an affair, it was very likely that she could become an elder, let alone a director position. If Madame Tianxin hadn't died, she would probably be around the same age as Madame Lianxin. In other words, it was very likely that Madame Tianxin didn't have a relationship with the Medical Academy's upper echelons, but one of her sisters. Han Yunxi looked at the brilliant smile on Gu's face. She still couldn't believe it. According to what you're saying, why is Madame Lianxin always targeting me? Madame Lianxin had been the most unkind of person in her rivalry with Third Elder. That's a matter between the two sisters. Han Kongan was stripped of his position as a director, but no one stepped forward to protect him, right? Gu asked back with a smile. How do you know? Han Yunxi asked again. Gu didn't answer. He even withdrew his smile and said indifferently, "Let's go. I'll tell you when we reach Medicine City." Han Yunxi would undoubtedly go. Chapter 287. That night, Han Yunxi left with Gu without hesitation. Gu silently led her down a very remote road. Han Yunxi, who was unfamiliar with the road, only noticed the problem after walking halfway. This is the way to Medicine Cities. She was suspicious, but she wasn't afraid that Gu would kidnap her. If he really wanted to, he wouldn't have waited until now and spent so much effort. This road is a secret passage used to transport medicines specially supplied to the Medical Academy by Medicine City. It's a shortcut, so there won't be any robbers, Gu explained honestly. Due to the nature of this road, it was destined that only a few people in Medicine City and Medical City knew of its existence. Long Fei had heard of this road before, but in his current state of madness, he couldn't recall it. When he couldn't find Han Yunxi in the Medical Academy, he thought that she had returned to the inn. However, when he returned to the inn and saw the unconscious guard on the ground and the perplexing butterfly illusion on the table, he almost lost control. He mobilized all the men he could find in the vicinity to guard the 4 main gates of Medical City. At the same time, he divided his men into 2 groups. One group searched the city, while the other chased out the 4 main gates. Long Fei had already searched the Medical Academy once and asked Gu Beiwa, Luo Zuishan, Third Elder, and even Long Tianma and Qin Wangrong, who hadn't left yet, but to no avail. Fortunately, Third Elder had seen the world. Otherwise, he might have spilled the truth upon seeing Long Fei's cold and angry appearance. At this time, Long Fei was standing on the roof of the Medical Academy's tallest building. His robes and hair fluttered in the wind as he overlooked all of Medical City. It was dusk, and the afterglow of the sun illuminated everything in Medical City with a golden luster. However, the light couldn't penetrate his eyes, which were as dark as midnight. His entire body exuded a terrifying aura of viciousness, like a demon descending with the curtain of night. Every now and then, a black-robed guard would come to report, but even when the sun had set and night had fallen, he still hadn't received any good news. At this time, another guard came to report, "Your Highness, we've already chased them for 50 li from the west gate, but there's no trace of the Princess Consort. Please." Before he could finish his sentence, he suddenly kicked out and sent the guard flying into the darkness. "Useless thing," he said coldly. His entire being seemed to be bathed in flames of fury. "Han Yunxi, how dare you leave? Since you dared to leave without saying goodbye, you must not let this prince find you. Men, pass down my order. Seal off the Han residence. No one is allowed to enter or leave." Cold as he commanded, that woman had no idea that he'd been the one protecting the Han clan all this time after leaving the capital. Otherwise, Emperor Tianhui would have made his move long ago. Han Yunxi followed Gu and left Medical City in less than 2 hours. She didn't know that Long Feiyi had been looking for her in Medical City for 3 days and 3 nights. By the 4th day, there was still no news. He issued a bounty for anyone in Cloud Realm Continent who could provide clues or find Han Yunxi herself would be rewarded with 10,000 taels of gold. Tang Li couldn't stand it anymore and said, "Big bro, you're letting the entire world know that Qin Wangfei's gone missing. Your lordship wants her to know that she shouldn't think of staying anywhere else in the world besides your lordship's," Long Feiyi said. "You?" Tang Li didn't know how to coax him. With her personality, a forcibly picked melon won't be sweet. She was the one who kicked down the sedan chair. Your lordship didn't force her. Long Feiyi's anger had yet to subside, but only grew. Tang Li paused before asking, "Could it have been that man from the Shadow Clan who took her away?" Long Feiyi didn't answer, but gave Tang Li a deep look. Tang Li knew that the Shadow Clan had already become a taboo topic. But Aunt Ru was standing right outside the door and heard their conversation. Shadow Clan. Aunt Ru was so shocked that she almost screamed out loud. Shadow Clan. Wasn't the Shadow Clan destroyed? How could there be a Shadow Clan? Could it be that there were still descendants of Western Qin's imperial family? What was the relationship between Han Yunxi and the Shadow Clan? What did Tang Li mean by that? Aunt Ru was about to rush over and ask, but she stopped after thinking for a moment. Even Tang Li dared to hide such an important matter from her. If she rushed over, how could they say anything? Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi. Aunt Ru's eyes hardened as she looked at Long Feiyi's thin back. She turned around and left. That day, she gathered all of the Tang sex men that Long Feiyi had borrowed. As the second in command, she issued a secret order to kill Han Yunxi without mercy. At this time, even Tang Li didn't know about this. She didn't care who Han Yunxi was, nor did she care about Han Yunxi's relationship with the Shadow Clan. The Shadow Clan represented Western Qin's imperial family. Once Western Qin's imperial family was implicated, she had to eliminate the source of trouble. The news quickly spread. Unfortunately, Gu and Han Yunxi had taken the mountain path. Before they reached Medicine City, they'd only passed by small villages at most. News wasn't that fast. At this time, the two of them were each riding a horse on a small path in the wilderness. Mu Xian and Lianxin, their sisters, but why are their fates so different? Han Yunxi asked curiously. She wasn't sure if Gu knew that Han Kongan wasn't her biological father. She also didn't know why Gu was investigating Lady Tianxin, so she chose to hide it for now. It really is a little big. One seduced a married man, while the other married into the poison sect. Gu laughed. Han Yunxi was bewildered. Married into the poison sect? What do you mean? In truth, Gu had been investigating Mu Xian for a long time. When he was young, he'd overheard that a daughter of the Mu clan in Medicine City was having an affair with a descendant of the poison sect. He'd been investigating the matter ever since. He'd purposely approached Mu Ling, because of Mu Xian. After many years of investigation, he'd finally confirmed that the Mu clan's daughter was called Mu Xian. She was the 4th daughter and had been missing for many years. If he hadn't coincidentally seen the Xian character embroidered on the back of Han Yunxi's medical pouch, he would never have guessed that it was Lady Tianqin. The Xian character had also appeared on the things Mu Xian had left behind in the Mu clan. Following the Xian character, he'd finally confirmed that the missing Mu Xian was the same Lady Tianqin who'd married Han Kangin and changed her surname to Bailey Tianqin. Gu Qishao didn't hold back at all as he told Han Yunxi everything. Han Yunxi listened in a daze, her heart secretly shocked by one thing. So, her birth father was from the poison sect. Was that why little thing was so clingy? Poison lass, are you saying that you're Han Kangin daughter? Or, Gu purposely paused and leaned closer to her, his voice very low. Or, are you also a descendant of the poison sect? Only Lady Tianqin knew about this. If she hadn't told Han Kangin that she was pregnant back then, he probably wouldn't have known. Of course Gu didn't know, which was why he'd asked. Han Yunxi's mouth twitched. This guy had told her everything. Should she tell him, or not? Hey, why are you investigating Mu Xian? Do you have a grudge against the poison sect? Han Yunxi asked instead of answering. Gu suddenly burst into laughter. Poison lass, take a guess? Han Yunxi smiled as well. What if I accidentally become a descendant of the poison sect? You won't expose me, will you? This was Han Yunxi's first time learning that there were still descendants of the poison sect. From what she knew, the poison sect was different from the medical academy. The head of the medical academy was chosen through election, while the head of the poison sect was hereditary. Thus, the descendant of the poison sect referred to the bloodline of the head of the poison sect. If Lady Tianqin was a daughter of the Mu clan, and her father was the head of the poison sect, then she would have nothing to do with the Shadow clan. That white-robed man wasn't here to protect her. There was too much information, so Han Yunxi's mind wandered off, and she forgot about her joke with Gu. Meanwhile, Gu Qishao was seriously considering her joke. If she really did become a descendant of the poison sect, what would he do? Han Yunxi, I, Gu, have never believed in ghosts or gods since I was young. Today, I'm praying to the heavens that you're not a descendant of the poison sect. I'm praying that you're not a poison woman. Before they knew it, the two of them were lost in each other's thoughts. It was rare for them to be so quiet when they were together. The white horses traveled side by side, one dressed in white robes while the other dressed in purple robes. As they traveled through the forest, anyone who didn't know better would think they were a pair of lovers who didn't envy mandarin ducks or immortals. But their hearts were heavy as they pondered the most important thing in their lives. After Gu and Han Yunxi left the forest, the Chu siblings emerged from the side. Although the two of them were dressed neatly, the wounds from their trip to the poison grounds were still scattered all over their bodies. The black spiders in the second door weren't poisonous, but Chu Qingge had been too nervous and made a mistake in her judgment. She'd used medicine indiscriminately and ended up with these spots. Duanmu Bei had gone to find Duanmu Yao. It was rare for the two of them to travel together. Big bro, lure that red-robed man away. I'm going to find Han Yunxi for revenge. Chu Qingge was still fuming. They hadn't left Medical City until they found out that Long Fei Yi had offered a bounty for Han Yunxi. Unfortunately, they'd run into each other in the wilderness. Actually, Chu Tianyin had suffered the heaviest injuries while protecting Chu Qingge, but he didn't complain at all, much less hold a grudge. Qingge, just pretend this never happened. Don't worry about it, all right? Chu Tianyin asked mildly. Never happened? Chu Qingge couldn't believe it. Big bro, don't tell me you've been bewitched by that woman too. What else does she know besides a bit of poison arts? Chu Tianyin knitted his brows and didn't reply. Chu Qingge grew even angrier and took out her bow to chase after him, but Chu Tianyin grabbed her bow and stopped her. Qingge, don't worry about anything related to Han Yunxi in the future. If you run into her, yield to her, understand? Why should I? Chu Qingge finally sensed that something was off. Although her big brother had a good temper, he wasn't the type to let anyone take advantage of him or bully him. These are father's orders. It's best if you don't ask any questions, Chu Tianyin added. A complicated look flickered past Chu Qingge's eyes. She was all too familiar with her big brother's words. When father had her learn poisons, he'd said the same thing. These are orders. It's best if you don't ask any questions. Chapter 288. Long Fei Ye's bounty notice stirred up all of Cloud Realm continent. Medicine City was no exception. That evening, Han Yunxi and Gu arrived at the south gates of Medicine City. They hadn't even entered the gates when they saw a crowd of people in the distance. Something big happened in Medicine City. Gu walked up curiously, only to see a huge bounty notice plastered to the wall. There was only a portrait and 2 sentences on the notice. The portrait was large and took up 2/3 of the entire notice. The woman in the picture had beautiful features and a face as delicate as a flower. Even a mere portrait couldn't hide the noble air she was born with. Gu Qixiao recognized Han Yunxi as soon as he saw her. Below the portrait were 2 lines of words. The first line read, "Return quickly or face the consequences." The second line read, "Anyone who reports to the Duke of Qin's estate will be rewarded 10,000 taels of gold." Aside from that, there was no explanation as to how Han Yunxi had disappeared. There wasn't even a mention of the word missing. The Duke of Qin's bounty for anyone looking for his Wangfei was already a big deal. With such a tyrannical bounty notice, it was hard not to make the headlines of Cloud Realm continent. The crowd was making all sorts of guesses. Some said Han Yunxi had been kidnapped, while others said Han Yunxi had gone missing. There were even some who speculated that His Highness Duke of Qin was simply putting on a show for Emperor Tianhui. He no longer wanted this woman despite all the guesses. No one expected Han Yunxi to run away of her own accord. All the women in the world were racking their brains to get close to His Highness Duke of Qin. How could anyone run away of their own accord? As Gu Qixiao stared and stared, his smile grew wider and wider until he almost laughed out loud. He never expected Han Yunxi to run away of her own accord one day. No wonder she wouldn't answer him when he asked her where Long Fei Yi had gone, or whether he knew her whereabouts on the Long Fei Yi. Gu rubbed his chin as he admired the portrait with interest. The more he admired it, the better he felt. What to do? He really liked poison lass more and more. Han Yunxi, even if you've married into the Duke of Qin's household, as long as you want to leave, this young master will dare to take you away. Long Fei Ye's high-profile bounty could only mean that he hadn't found the person he was looking for. He didn't even have a clue. Gu smiled until his eyes narrowed into a line. Just as he was about to look for Han Yunxi, he turned around and saw Han Yunxi standing behind him with a white veil covering her face. In a flash, Gu's bewitching eyes turned as tender as water. Even his expression softened as he said, "Yunxi, from now on, I'll follow you to the ends of the earth. We'll never part, all right?" Unfortunately, Han Yunxi didn't look at him, nor did she hear what he said. She looked up at the wanted poster on the wall with an extremely serious expression. After a long time, Han Yunxi lowered her head to look at Gu. Gu's gaze was still gentle, but Han Yunxi didn't take it seriously. She only said mildly, "Still not leaving?" Gu gestured at the bounty poster and teased, 10,000 taels of gold. "I'll take you to get your reward, okay?" Han Yunxi's expression was still solemn. "All right." He wouldn't trade for it even if he gave me the entire Tianing country's treasury, Gu said confidently. Han Yunxi gave a start. Gu's words sounded so familiar. She'd heard similar words of love before, hadn't she? Reality proved that they couldn't be taken seriously. Gu purposely covered his face before entering the city with Han Yunxi. As soon as they entered the city, bounty posters could be seen everywhere. If this was the case in Medicine City, one could only imagine the other places. Long Fei Yi, this madman. Why did he want to take her back? Why did he keep using her without explaining anything? When he was in a good mood, he held her hand, but when he was in a bad mood, he bullied her. Han Yunxi would look at the bounty posters on both sides at first, but in the end, she pretended not to see them. Long Fei Yi, do you want me to have nowhere else to go? I don't believe it. It was evening when Gu and Han Yunxi settled down at the inn closest to the Mu clan. They asked for 2 rooms, one next to the other. Gu saw Han Yunxi's gloomy face the entire way and thought she'd be very unsettled. But she wasn't in a rush at all. After washing up and eating dinner, she came to ask him about the Mu clan. As for the bounty posters, she didn't mention a word. Gu wasn't a gossipy person. If Han Yunxi didn't mention it, he wouldn't ask. He was a person who only cared about the results, not the process. It was enough that Poison Lass was with him now. Everything else could go to hell. How can you be sure that Mu Xian is my mother based on this pattern alone? Han Yunxi went straight to the point. Gu had inadvertently found the Xian's character on her medical pouch. It was exactly the same as the Xian character on Mu Xian's belongings. Thus, he thought of Lady Tianxin. Following this line of thought, he found out that Lady Tianxin was Mu Xian, who had suddenly disappeared all those years ago. Gu only gave her a general idea on the way here. He didn't go into the details, saying that he'd tell her slowly when they reached Medicine City. It's the matter you asked Third Elder about. Back then, Lady Tianxin used Lady Lianxin's help to find Vice Head Lin. She skipped all the tests and directly nominated Han Kongan for the position of director. The reason Lady Lianxin helped was because Lady Tianxin was her biological sister, the fourth miss of the Mu clan Mu Xian. Since Gu had spoken, he had no intention of hiding anything. So that's how it was. Han Yunxi knew that she'd be able to find some clues in the medical academy. But how did this guy know when even Third Elder couldn't? After all, Lady Lianxin and Vice Head Lin had an affair. Vice Head Lin had gone easy on Han Kongan, and even Lady Tianxin's request for Lady Lianxin's help back then were all extremely private matters. How do you know? How do you know everything about the medical academy? This was the second time Han Yunxi had asked this question. There was no time when she didn't want to know Gu's background more than now. Seeing Han Yunxi's serious expression, Gu's gaze subconsciously softened. He really liked it when she looked at him so seriously. How do you know? Han Yunxi asked for the third time. Gu suddenly reached out to dotingly pat her head and smiled. Poison Lass, how I know isn't important. What's important is that we need to confirm whether or not you're a descendant of the poison sect. Han Yunxi was so close to telling him the truth. She'd have told him she was. But in the end, she held herself back. In this world, aside from Gu Beiyue, who didn't ask for anything from her and always helped her in secret, who didn't come for benefits. She didn't know why Gu had come, but from the first time they'd met and he'd saved her, she knew that this family had ulterior motives. What if I really am a descendant of the poison sect? Han Yunxi asked teasingly. To her surprise, Gu, who always answered her questions, didn't reply. He smiled and rubbed her head again with a doting smile. Good girl, rest first. I'll take you to the Mu estate tonight to meet someone. Han Yunxi didn't ask any further. Her mother had already passed away, and there was no way to fake her death in childbirth. Who was Gu taking her to the Mu estate to meet? Medicine City and the medical academy had a close relationship, and the poison sect was a taboo in the medical academy. As one of the three great clans in Medicine City, the Mu clan wouldn't touch the medical academy's taboo no matter what. Lady Tianxin's affairs were definitely shady. Hadn't Mu Xian gone missing all those years ago? Was Lady Lianxin the only one who knew of her whereabouts and that she was Lady Tianxin? Had Lady Tianxin's difficult labor been a pure accident, or was there another reason? Even though she'd found such a huge clue, Han Yunxi was still very confused about Lady Tianxin and her biological father. Seeing that Gu was about to leave, Han Yunxi hastily asked, "Where are you going?" Gu glanced back with a charming smile. Poison Lass, don't worry. Unless I die, I won't leave you behind. Unless he dies? Many years later, Han Yunxi found out everything about Gu Qishao, including his undying and indestructible body. Every time she recalled his words today, her face would fill with tears. Han Yunxi sighed softly as she watched Gu Qishao's figure disappear through the doorway. She walked to the window and saw that many of the bounty posters outside had been surrounded so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. She lowered her eyes and watched for a while before suddenly closing the window. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. She opened her medical pouch and wanted to take Lil Thing out for a chat, but who knew that Lil Thing wasn't in the pouch. After leaving the poison warehouse, she didn't know if Lil Thing had eaten its fill. Every day, she would take out many poisons from the detoxification system and put them in her medical pouch. Sometimes, Lil Thing would finish them all, and other times, it would leave them untouched. She couldn't understand Lil Thing, and didn't have the time to think about it. She could only feed it and hide it. Lil Thing wasn't here, but the poisons in her medical pouch were untouched. She guessed that Lil Thing must have slipped out to play. Along the way, Lil Thing had disappeared many times, but it would suddenly appear every time. After tidying up, Yunxi went back to her room to sleep. However, she never dreamed that Lil Thing would do such a terrifying thing in the hour she was sleeping. At this moment, Lil Thing was at the entrance of the medical hall in Medicine City. That's right, it was the medicinal hall that required membership and a gold card to enter. It was the highest level medicinal hall in Medicine City, and all the goods sold there were high-end goods. When Long Fei Yi brought Han Yunxi here for the first time, he directly threw a gold card to her to squander. It was said that Han Yunxi broke the personal spending record of the medicinal hall that day. The entrance to the medicinal hall was heavily guarded. Lil Thing wanted to sneak in a few times, but unfortunately, there weren't many people coming in and out, so Lil Thing couldn't take advantage of it. Lil Thing had already eaten its fill in the poison warehouse, so it came here to look for medicinal ingredients to change its taste. Actually, Lil Thing didn't only eat poison. When it was in a bad mood, Lil Thing would eat, and eat a living person. Lil Thing couldn't eat meat during this period of time, so it could at least look for expensive medicinal ingredients to fill its stomach. This was the so-called foodie. When they were hungry, they could eat as much as they wanted, but when they weren't, they were picky. Lil Thing was like a mouse, hiding in a corner and poking its head out from time to time. It waited and waited, smelling the waves of medicinal fragrance coming from inside. Finally, Lil Thing couldn't wait any longer. Thus, Lil Thing sneaked along the wall and crawled step by step towards the door. It was only the size of a palm who would notice it. Unfortunately, Chapter 289. Just as Lil Thing lowered its head and tiptoed towards the entrance of the medicinal herb clubhouse, there was a sudden shout. "There's a rat! There's a rat!" Fortunately, Lil Thing couldn't understand human language. Otherwise, it would have continued to crawl forward silently. The rat was clearly not referring to it. Hearing the shout, Lil Thing immediately raised its head and saw a burly man taking off his shoes and swatting at it. Lil Thing immediately dodged nimbly. At this time, the burly man saw clearly. It's not a rat, it's a squirrel. The person behind him was taking off his shoes as he responded, whether it's a squirrel or a rat. No rats are allowed to enter. Whether it was a high-class medicinal herb clubhouse or a small medicinal herb market that sold cheap goods, the two most taboo things were insects and rats. These two things were the most destructive to medicinal herbs. If they were used, it wouldn't be a big deal if some of them were eaten, but if they were sold, the price would drop, and the worst would be that they couldn't be sold. Therefore, places where medicinal herbs were sold would be protected against rats and insects. No matter how the person behind him shouted, the burly man didn't make a move. Instead, he stared at Lil Thing. Lil Thing anxiously hid at the foot of the wall and was blocked by the burly man. It was also staring at the burly man. This squirrel is white and so small. It doesn't look like a cub. The burly man pointed out the difference between Lil Thing and other squirrels in one sentence. Did you see wrongly? How can a squirrel be white? The young man behind him caught up. When he saw Lil Thing, he immediately changed what he said a second ago. It really is a squirrel. Let's catch it first. The burly man signaled the young man to surround it. Thus, the two of them surrounded Lil Thing with one hand and a shoe in the other. Lil Thing's black eyes kept rolling. Suddenly, before the two guards besieged it, it directly jumped into the air. The first reaction of the two guards was to pounce on it. Unfortunately, Lil Thing's feet pushed against the wall, and it actually bounced out and landed on the threshold, causing the two of them to bump into each other.
Ouch!
The two of them bumped into each other painfully. Seeing Lil Thing jump so fast, they were both puzzled. This little thing is quite interesting. Let's catch it first. It'll be troublesome if it runs in. The little thing was having so much fun that it forgot that it had been exposed. It squatted down on the threshold and squeaked provocatively. The burly man and the young man were shocked, but they couldn't care less. They rushed over and shouted, "Someone, there's a rat intruder.
Stop it."
Seeing that they were about to pounce down, the little thing jumped up again, playing with the two guards at the door until they fell into a ball.
Squeak.
Squeak. The little thing fell from the sky in a straight line and landed on the big man's head. It then jumped onto the young man's body and amused itself. It was very happy. It hadn't played like this for a long time. When its old master was still alive, it used to jump around like this every day. Now that the poison sect was destroyed and its old master was gone, it had finally found a new master. It could only obediently hide. It knew that many people in the world wanted it, so it couldn't harm its new master. Lil Thing was a sentimental child. Thinking up to here, it stopped hopping and sat down on the burly man's face. It tilted its head sadly. But at this time, many people in the medicine hall gathered around. They were all shocked to see Lil Thing like this. "I've never seen a white squirrel before. It's so small, so cute. Is this squirrel for sale? You can sell it to me if you catch it." Amidst the discussion, Lil Thing was still immersed in the past. It didn't know that the burly man was reaching out to grab it, nor did it know that several guards had already surrounded it with rat nets and were waiting for an opportunity. Soon, the leader made a hand gesture and two large nets came down on Lil Thing's head. Squeak! Lil Thing shrieked. It wanted to escape, but it was too late. The guards pulled in the nets and tied Lil Thing up. At this moment, everyone gathered around to take a closer look at the little thing. They could see the little thing even more clearly. It's so cute. Where did it come from? There's no such breed of squirrel, right? Did someone raise one that dyed it? How much do you want to sell it for? Name a price? I'll buy it, I'll buy it. I'll buy it no matter how much it costs. Those who could buy medicinal herbs here were all rich people. They wouldn't even blink an eye if they spent a lot of money here. In their world, they were afraid of not having enough things to buy and not having enough money to buy. It was rare to see such a special squirrel. Everyone started to talk, and soon they started to argue. Lil Thing wasn't afraid. It was actually very easy for it to escape. It stared at the people around it with wide eyes. It couldn't understand why these people were arguing so fiercely. When the guards saw this situation, they exchanged glances. One of them said, "Everyone quiet down. How about this? Let's compete for a price. The highest bidder gets it." Anyway, everyone worked together to catch it at the entrance. It wasn't considered something from the medicine hall. Before the warden was alerted, they should quickly scam these rich people. Lil Thing saw that everyone suddenly quieted down. Its sneaky black eyes looked around, and it was puzzled. What was going on? "I'll pay 1,000 taels." Someone couldn't wait to bid. Double. 3,000. Hee, 10,000. In just a short while, the price had reached 10,000 taels. 10,000 taels was enough to buy a very high-grade medicinal herb in the medicine hall. The crowd paused for a moment. Many of them hesitated. A few of the guards exchanged glances. Each of them was overjoyed in their hearts. 10,000 taels was something they couldn't earn in their lifetime. Even if they divided it among a few people, they would still get a lot. Not to mention buying wine, they would even have enough money to support their families. The leader couldn't wait to shout, 10,000 taels. Is there anyone else who wants to bid? Who knew that a woman would suddenly shout, 20,000 taels. 20,000 taels? For a moment, the whole place quieted down. Many people were shocked. Most of the guards were dumbfounded. 20,000 taels. Not to mention this life. They wouldn't even have to worry about it in their next life. Looking towards the source of the voice, they saw a young woman with a pretty face. She was dressed in white and carried a long thing on her back. It was wrapped in red cloth. It looked like a bow or sword. Facing everyone's gaze, the woman in white wasn't nervous. Her face was cold, and her eyes were proud. She was simply a cold beauty. Seeing that everyone was looking at the cold beauty, Lil Thing also looked over. When it saw her, its entire mouse body felt unwell. It was her, that cold beauty who wanted to shoot arrows at its master in the poisonous herb storage. It was finished. She had seen it. Would its master be angry? No, she didn't know it. Its master wouldn't know either. Thinking of this, Lil Thing felt relieved. It silently watched, not knowing what this cold beauty wanted to do. For a long time, no one bid. 20,000 taels was indeed high. Rich people weren't stupid. After all, this was just a plaything. The woman in white swept her gaze around. Seeing that no one was bidding, the guards were so excited that they couldn't speak. Since no one is bidding, I'll buy it. The woman in white took out 2 banknotes and stretched out her other hand towards the guards. At this time, Lil Thing, who had been silently watching everything, suddenly narrowed its eyes and stared at the banknotes. So it was like this. This group of people wanted to buy it. If it couldn't understand the exchange of money with one hand and goods with the other, it would have lived in vain. Lil Thing was very angry. Was it only worth 2 banknotes? Currently, the guard was handing over the rat-catching bag to Chuchinga when the angry Lil Thing jumped up without warning. It was so strong that it knocked aside both the guard and Chuchinga's hands, leaving 2 bloody scratches on Chuchinga's hand.
Ah!
Chuchinga cried out, caught off guard. The guard was frightened as well. In a moment of panic, he dropped the banknotes in his hands. Lil Thing jumped to the ground and tore up the 2 banknotes before jumping on top of the guard's head. Its chest heaved in anger. These people had gone too far. Instead of running away, it spat out a gold card from its mouth in front of everyone. For a moment, everyone was stunned. Even Chuchinga was so stunned that she forgot about the wound on her hand. Such a small mouth could spit out such a large gold card. Just what was Lil Thing doing? Lil Thing threatened Chuchinga with the card in its mouth as it waved its paws at her. This bad woman wanted to buy it for a mere 20,000 taels? Why didn't she take a look at the thing in its hands? This was the highest level of gold card in Cloud Realm Continent. It had no limit to its limits. Supposedly, the number of people in Cloud Realm Continent with such a card could be counted on one's fingers. Chuchinga looked at the torn banknotes on the ground, then at Lil Thing's provocative actions. She couldn't even breathe as her stomach filled with rage. She was in a bad mood to begin with and had come to the Medical Materials Association to spend money happily. Instead, a little beast looked down on her like this. She'd never be able to quell her anger until she killed it. You're seeking death. Her eyes flashed as she reached out a poisonous hand towards Lil Thing. But all of the guards surrounded her and blocked her way. Miss, calm your anger, calm your anger. Miss, you can't. Someone left Lil Thing behind. No matter how greedy the guards were, they didn't dare to act rashly at the sight of such a gold card. There were very few people in Cloud Realm Continent with such a card, and only a handful of them had ever spent money at the Medical Materials Association. All of them were important figures they couldn't afford to offend. No matter what Lil Thing was, it must have run off on its own with its owner. If it died here, even the Medical Materials Association's boss and president would have a hard time explaining themselves. Naturally, Chuchinga recognized the gold card as well, but she was too angry to care who it belonged to. She took out 2 more banknotes to shake off the guards and said coldly, "This thing already belongs to this lady. If I want it to die, it has to die." But at this moment, a low male voice spoke up from behind her. "Miss Chu, rather than venting your anger on a squirrel, why don't you have its owner come out and apologize to you?" Chuchinga looked back and saw a refined man with an elegant bearing. It was none other than the Medical Materials Association's left manager and Medicine City's Wang clan's 3rd young master, Wang Ruochen. Others might not know who Chuchinga was, but Wang Yichen did. He'd admired her for a long time, but never had a chance to express his goodwill. Chuchinga had no interest in Wang Ruochen at all. Coldly, she said, How do you know who its owner is? Wang Ruochan chuckled. The owner of the gold card is its owner. Show me the card and I'll know. The Medical Materials Association was one of the Wang clan's businesses. As its left manager, Wang Ruochan was in charge of its accounts. As long as a gold card had been used here, he could recognize its owner. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.